Chapter 480. It was different this time. Among the third-generation red dragons, Griffin was one of the more valued ones. Although he was violent and had a serious tendency to destroy, as a combat dragon, all these could only be regarded as advantages. Griffin was killed almost instantly. The Red Dragon Queen did not sense the specific situation, but she instinctively believed that it must be a strong one. But the image of the soul sent by a little female dragon later made Alexstrasza not know whether to laugh or cry. Duke Marcus. The moment she saw the image, Alexstrasza recognized Duque. To be honest, Alexstrasza had never taken the strong humans seriously. There were only a few humans who could really catch her eye. Back then, even when it came to breaking dawn mages and monarchs like Anastrian and Antonidas, this queen only said, "Oh," and did not continue. Even in the long tens of thousands of years, there were not many great people who could be remembered by her. The only one she remembered was Duque, and it was Duque, who was only an earth mage at that time. There was no other reason than that the siege of Karazhan had left a deep impression on her. The magic barrage that was like a torrential rain, the magic baptism that seemed to be able to cause the entire Red Dragon army to suffer heavy casualties, was actually forcibly turned into unprecedented fireworks by that little Duque. Alexstrasza felt as if her entire race had been toyed with by Duke. She couldn't even hit the target with a small spell that didn't even count as an itch, but would always hit the target. Later on, she had to secretly be grateful to this cunning young man, and almost gave him a certificate of merit. Now he was here again, as a possible savior. Speaking of which, being controlled this time was the dragons shooting themselves in the foot. Because of Nesario's betrayal, the dragons suffered heavy casualties, and even caused the blue dragons to almost go extinct. In the end, the corrupted soul of the dragon was taken back, and the dragons cast a spell on this divine artifact that had become the soul of the demon, making it impossible for any dragon to use this divine artifact. But the arrogant dragons forgot about the other races, which led to today's humiliation. If it was in the past, she wouldn't have cared if the Alliance sent a kid to save her. Unfortunately, after being controlled by the devil's soul and enslaved by the orcs, the dignity of the dragons had been trampled on. Being chained up, being wantonly beaten, and being subjected to pain on the soul level moreover, the orc warlock Necros was already using her as a bargaining chip to force the second-generation dragons to mate and produce more young dragons for the tribe. If Alexstrasza hadn't discovered that as long as she maintained her human form, the orcs wouldn't force her to mate with other dragons, the outcome might have been even worse. In fact, Alexstrasza couldn't hold on much longer. She could feel herself weakening on a spiritual level. If she completely succumbed or weakened, then she would not be able to maintain the protective magic on her dragon egg to protect her child that might be born. The Azeroth dragon was a little strange. The eggs of the female dragon were not the real offspring. Just like a human female's egg, not every egg would become a child, but an egg would be released every month. The red dragon was similar. Female dragons would ovulate at relatively regular intervals, dragon eggs. However, these dragon eggs could only hatch and become real dragons after the male dragon imbued them with a special spiritual inheritance and power. Of course, female dragons could also use their power to catalyze the eggs to hatch young dragons. But these young dragons were usually just trash. The power of the parents determined the upper limit of the offspring's power. If a dragon wanted to give birth to a strong offspring, it was best to find a dragon of a similar level as a partner. Alexstrasza knew very well that countless ambitious people were eyeing her precious dragon eggs. The Red Dragon Queen couldn't help but mutter in her heart, "Duque, come and save me. If you can save me before my babies are destroyed, then I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life. Otherwise, if it's too late, don't blame me for taking it out on you. It seems like I can't beg a little human to be so perfect." I'm so conflicted. On the one hand, she had to place her hopes on Duque and hope that he would come quickly. On the other hand, she felt that it was too much to place her hopes on a human who wasn't very powerful. Alexstrasza, who was deep in the whirlpool of despair, was actually a little confused at this moment. Duque could not guess the thoughts of the once high and mighty Red Dragon Queen. At this moment, Duque had met an unexpected ally. In the original time and space, when the Alliance mobilized to save the Red Dragon Queen, the main force of the Horde had already been defeated, leaving only the scattered tribes and clans resisting stubbornly. Therefore, in the entire wetland area, besides the Orc Dragon Riders of the Dragonmaw clan, there were also a large number of Alliance armed forces. The Griffin Knights of the Wildhammer Dwarves from the Eagle Nest Mountain, the Bronzebeard Dwarves from the Iron Furnace Castle, and the Silver Hand from Lordaeron. At this point in time, this was the standard definition of the enemy's rear. Duque didn't expect anyone to come here to help him, but who knew that he would meet an important person, Prince Muradin Bronzebeard. He was said to be a prince because the father of the 3 Bronzebeard brothers had died, and now Magni Bronzebeard was the king. As Magni's second brother, Muradin was naturally promoted to a prince. After the little female dragon ran away, seeing Muradin and a group of dwarven warriors emerge from the ground, Duque was dumbfounded. "Why are you here?" "Nonsense. You, the deputy commander of the Alliance, can come. Why can't I, the Cosmodan dwarf, be here?" Yes, dwarves were always so simple and direct. In the eyes of humans, this was almost too rough. Duque couldn't help but smile. That's right. Strictly speaking, this was still dwarven territory, just that it was occupied by the Horde. Haha, I was wrong. I'm so happy to see you, my friend. Duque bent down happily and opened his arms. Duque immediately knew that he was too happy. "Welcome, Bronzebeard dwarf, my eternal friend." Muradin, who was carrying at least 60 kilograms of armor, almost pounced on Duque and gave him a bear hug. Kalala, Duque could clearly hear the crisp sound of his bones. Just a little more, and Duque felt that he would have broken many bones all over his body. Muradin immediately realized that he had gone too far, and immediately let go of Duque. "Damn it, you human mages just have weak bodies. Woo-woo. I'm asking for it. It's my fault. I'm just a university animal, and I transmigrated to this body. You're blaming me? I'm already training. I'm training, all right." Chapter 481. Duque lamented in his heart as he complained, "Not every man is called Arnold Schwarzenegger." Alas, Azeroth was still a world with backward medical care and harsh natural environments. Babies who weren't particularly strong couldn't survive to adulthood at all. In a sense, the average physique of modern people was actually far inferior to that of medieval European adults. That was a long story. Ahem. Duque coughed a few times before he could catch his breath. Muradin glanced around. "Come on, let's get back to our base." The dwarves really had burrowed out of the ground. No one would have thought that under the wet, muddy swamp, the dwarves had opened countless tunnels. They weren't simply reinforced with wooden planks, but tunnels with standard beams and pillars, as well as stone roofs. Looking at the tunnel, which was rather low by human standards, and was wet from time to time, Muradin immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, my friends. We didn't mean to mistreat you. After all, this is built to dwarven standards. The most majestic dwarf wouldn't be taller than 1.6 meters, so the dwarves already found the tunnels at a height of 1.8 meters to be very comfortable. This was hard on the big guy Gavin Rad, who had to crouch all the way along. Walking in the tunnels, everyone got over it. Only Marion used her magic, a little disgusted. She covered the entire ceiling, walls, and ground with frost elements to make sure that the places she walked were relatively clean. Muradin frowned but didn't say anything. As they walked and talked, Duque finally learned why Muradin was here. At the beginning of the Alliance, Muradin had stayed in Lordaeron as the highest representative of the bronze-bearded dwarves in the Alliance. He also tried his best to get support for his country. Muradin soon discovered that, in fact, it was enough for him to deal with Duque, because as long as his request wasn't too outrageous, Duque would get it for the bronze-bearded dwarves, even if he had to go to other human kingdoms to extort, and use his own fleet to deliver it directly to the meeting point on the northern coast of Ironstove Castle. Medicine, food, even iron ore. Duque did the best that an ally could do. Over time, Muradin and Duque became very good friends. Recently, The alliance had begun to switch from defense to offense. Muradin could no longer sit still and handed over the work to his deputy. He immediately rushed back to the Iron Furnace Fort. In a situation where Magni was unable to allocate more manpower to him, the second son of the Bronzebeard family relied on his dozen or so good friends to attack the mines controlled by the orcs and rescue many of his compatriots from within. Then, relying on these rescued compatriots, they organized a resistance army in the wetlands and attacked the orcs everywhere. Duque couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. I was wondering why the sky was filled with flying dragons, but it turns out they're actually searching for you. Duque felt like he had been implicated. Muradin did not show any weakness. Isn't it to prepare in advance? When you attack Solderbridge, we can support you from the south. Duque smiled bitterly. After walking for more than half an hour, they finally arrived at the base of Muradin's rebel army, the Verga excavation site in the southern part of the wetlands. Unlike the excavation site in the future, which was filled with all sorts of things, this was now just the dwarves' excavation site. The innumerable pits and complicated terrain gave the orcs a headache. To the orcs, the dwarves here were even more troublesome than groundhogs that loved to dig holes. The orcs had temporarily abandoned this place. In a sense, this was a liberated area for the dwarves. In the huge cave, the dwarves here noticed the guests Muradin had brought, as well as Sasha and Marion in the group. A dwarf's eyes lit up. Ah, beautiful elven ladies! And two of you! The dwarf ran over and bowed clumsily. Falstead the dragon catcher is at your service, elven ladies. Note that this fellow only bowed to Sasha. Only then did Duque realize that before him, the high elves of Kuel Salis were the dwarves' only truly trusted allies. Of course, this did not completely explain why Falstead's attention was focused on Sasha. It wasn't just him. Most of the dwarves' gazes were focused on her. Evidently, they found her very charming. Ugh, did you forget someone? At the side, Marion had her hands on her hips, the word annoyed written all over her face. Duque hurriedly tried to smooth things over. All right. For the sake of your liberation, let's get down to business. The group of 5 ignored this little interlude and went to an even more secluded cave within the large cave. It was very narrow when they entered, and there was a huge sluice gate. According to Muradin, it could even block out dragon breath. When they arrived at Muradin's command center and saw the flags representing the orcs on the sand table, Duque immediately realized that things were more troublesome than he had imagined. He saw many small flags near the Grimbader fortress that was now under the control of the orcs. Muradin introduced them to Duque one by one. Those damned green-skinned creatures knew this day would come. Ever since Orgrim and the Horde suffered a tragic defeat at the gates of Lordaeron, the Horde's forces began to gather here. Look, these are all second-rate clans of the Horde. Each clan has about 10,000 to 30,000 people, and most of them are adult orcs. This is a steel tooth, that's a digging tooth, and that's a broken axe. Duque narrowed his eyes. Without the Red Dragon army, the victorious Alliance army would not take long to reach the Cosmodan region. Yes, the Alliance of Lordaeron might have to go all out to reach here, but Duque had no doubt that the Alliance could do it. Duque could almost imagine the scene of the Alliance army gathering north of Solderbridge. However, as long as Orgrim was still the chief of the Horde, he could imagine that the Alliance wanted to further weaken the orcs before the army attacked. The simplest way was to kill the Red Dragon Queen, or rescue her. Also, the clumsy Lordaeron elite bandits had already sounded the alarm for the orcs. This situation was at least 10 times harsher than the rescue mission in history. Now more than 100,000 orcs had surrounded Grim Battle. Even if the combat power of these second-rate clans was at most half of the orc warriors of the Blackstone and Warsong clans, and not much stronger than ordinary human soldiers, they were still not 100,000 pigs. Duque, you said you want to save the Red Dragon Queen? Are you confident? If you are, I have 1,000 elites here to carry out a feint attack for you. The heroic Muradin was definitely a friend. One look, and you could tell that he was the kind of good brother who was willing to go through mountains of knives and seas of fire for his brothers. Chapter 482. In history, Muradin and his younger brother, Bjuflang Bronzebeard, founded an organization known as the Association of Explorers. Later, one of Muradin's adventures took him to the icy hell of Northrend in the north. There, he began to search for a cursed sword called Frostmourne. However, he was surrounded by a large number of undead troops and forced to retreat. Under the fierce attack of the undead troops, he found himself rescued by his old friend Earthes. In this way, Muradin followed Earthes step by step into a dead end. Even when he saw Earthes disobey his father's orders and burn the departing ships, even when he saw Earthes recruit local mercenaries to fight for him, and then kill them treacherously, Muradin still did not abandon him. It was not until he defeated the guards and found Frostmourne that Muradin read the inscription on the tablet, told him that it was a cursed sword, and immediately prepared to leave. However, Earthes did not care. He walked to the pedestal and took out the sword. The sword burst out of its ice prison, and the flying fragments pierced through Muradin like spears. Muradin did not die, but this became an eternal pain in Muradin's heart. Duque sighed quietly in his heart. He did not want these dwarfs to die. Moreover, the most critical piece of the puzzle in the plan was still missing. Muradin was keen on the war with the orcs, but unfortunately, with the intervention of the dragons, the war between the Alliance and the orcs became a very insignificant matter. Compared to the Wing of Death, Cosmodon's more than 100,000 orcs were nothing. Duque muttered in his heart, "Nesario, where the hell are you?" At the same moment as Duque muttered, Duque suddenly felt two gazes. These two gazes gave Duque a very strange feeling. It was clearly an ordinary gaze, but it suddenly changed. Duque turned his head, but he could not see a single stranger. In the command center, other than his team of 5, there was only Muradin and Falstead, who had just run over to Sasha to please her. This guy was the captain of the Griffin squadron that Kudrin Wildhammer had sent to his cousin Magni, because there was no need to use the Griffins in the defense of Iron Furnace Castle. He ended up following Muradin. For a moment, Duque almost suspected that his feeling was wrong. But who was Duque? He was one of the best transmigrators after transmigrating to the hell-level world of Azeroth. Duque, who claimed to be an old driver from hell. Duque had always believed in his intuition, because he firmly believed that the so-called intuition of danger was just the brain's judgment of dangerous situations. Perhaps he couldn't react rationally, but his brain had already determined that this was a dangerous situation, and he instinctively informed Duque. There must be a reason behind this abnormality. Duque had a plan. Falstead, are you familiar with the Orc Dragon Cavalry's patrol route? Falstead was happy to show off his strength in front of Sasha. If it was still those brainless green-skinned creatures commanding the red dragons blindly, I might still be worried. Because you can never talk to a fool about the rules. When he said this, the entire command center burst into laughter. The orc commander might be more intelligent, but most of the orcs under him were pure boorish men. Dealing with such a person was a headache for both the enemy and friend. Falstead's voice rose an octave. But I found that those stupid green-skinned creatures were fooled by the red dragons. Not every red dragon is willing to work for the green-skinned creatures. Those red dragons purposely formed a patrolling airspace that looked strict, but was actually full of flaws. As long as you are willing to trust me, I can use the griffins to fly you all the way to the foot of grim battle in the dark. This was the benefit of having a local guide. If Kudrin led the army directly in, it would most likely turn into a large-scale aerial battle. The Wildhammer dwarves were not afraid of death, but Duque did not dare to be so wasteful. Duque whistled. Not bad. If we can avoid the orc camp, then when we reach the foot of the mountain, I can bring my team all the way to grim battle with illusions. Recalling how Duque used a wide-area illusion to trick the red dragons in the sky, Muradin muttered, "Magic is so convenient. I was thinking that to save the red dragon queen, we would need at least a squad of elite knights and rangers." Duque patted Muradin's shoulder and turned to his team. "All right, let's vote. Do you trust our Wildhammer brothers?" "It doesn't matter." Gavinrad shrugged. "I will follow your orders, sir." Ronan lowered his head. Marion frowned, but Sasha said directly, "What if we happen to run into a dragon cavalry patrol?" Falstead patted his chest proudly. If there are less than 4 red dragons, we, the Wildhammer Knights, will tell those big lizards that this is the dwarves' territory. A Griffin Knight squadron had about 15 to 20 Griffin Knights. In fact, this was not a weak force. Seeing Sasha's frown, Falstead comforted her. Don't worry. If there really is a mishap, we will send you and Mr. Paladin to the ground first. Falstead elegantly ignored the 3 mages. That's right. Mages who could not fall to their deaths with slow fall were all F*King hooligans. In the summer, moonless nights were not easy to find. Duque and his team stayed in Muradin's nest for 3 days before the desired weather arrived. Feeling uneasy, Sasha followed Falstead onto the Griffin. The Griffin she was riding on screeched at its companion next door, as if it was mocking them. There were 2 people in the same carriage, but on his side, there was a nimble elf girl, and on the other side, there was a burly, fully armored holy knight. The face of the neighboring Griffin had obviously darkened. The dwarf knight had to eat a large piece of raw meat before taking off before the Griffin brother flapped its wings and took off. Obviously, either Falstead's patrol route was wrong, or they had run out of luck. Even though the moon was dim, 2 new spots in the distance caught the Griffin team's attention. These 2 spots in the sky kept moving, growing larger and larger as they charged towards them. What are those? Flying at high speed in the wind. Falstead leaned forward and turned to look at Sasha behind him. He knew that this elven ranger had better night vision than him. Sasha's mouth was bitter. In the name of the Sunwell, those are 2 dragons. At this moment, she hated the bragging dwarf Griffin knight in front of her. What happened to sneaking into the village and not wanting to shoot? Dragons, and there were 2 of them at once. Are they red? Falstead pressed, unwilling to give up. Does that matter? Dragons are dragons. Will there be dragons of other colors on this battlefield? They're charging at us at high speed. Sasha shouted. Chapter 483. As the elven rangers with the best eyesight, Sasha and Falstead's griffins were also flying at the front. Less than 20 meters behind Sasha, Duque glanced at the other griffin riders and saw that the other dwarves had also noticed the 2 dragons. Without even needing the horn, the dwarven riders immediately adjusted their formation and spread out. On the left and right, 2 teams of 6 griffins quickly moved forward, overtaking the other griffins in the center. The dwarves followed the established strategy and began to protect important guests like Duque. In the distance, the 2 dragons also moved in a strategic manner. For some reason, the movements of these 2 dragons reminded Duque of the 2 plane formations commonly used in modern aerial battles. The larger one flew to a higher position and then flew away from its companion. Duque immediately realized what this giant beast wanted to do. Even if he didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that griffins and dragons had a limit. Griffins could still use tactics to counteract the red dragon's racial advantage against a young red dragon. Once the red dragon rose to the level of a young dragon, apart from Kudrin's Griffin King, no griffins could keep up with the young dragon's movements. It was just like how the griffin was a propeller biplane from World War I. If it was up against a more advanced propeller monoplane, it might be able to put up a fight, but against a 5th-generation jet plane, it was just a joke. The dragon didn't climb because it was afraid of the griffins. On the contrary, it was because the dragon was too fast. If it rushed at it, it might miss. But if the dragon occupied the sky, it would be a completely different story. Diving down from the sky, the slower party wouldn't be able to avoid a high-speed dive no matter what they did. The dragon used the sky as a jar, put the griffins and the passengers in the middle, and then caught them like turtles in a jar. These 2 are experienced riders. Falstead shouted excitedly. The one who climbs is especially good. This will be a glorious battle. Glorious my ass. Didn't they say to put down the passengers first? At this moment, Sasha felt like strangling Falstead to death. Damn dwarf knights. Once their blood boiled, they couldn't care about anything else. According to human legends, dwarves were born from rocks. Of course, this legend had no basis, but it could also describe the stubbornness of the dwarves. Once he made up his mind, he would not change his mind no matter what. There were less than 20 breaths before they would enter battle mode. Sasha was so anxious that she was cursing out loud. Apart from Lilith, that expressionless and cold ghost, the other 3 Windrunner sisters all had very pleasant voices. Even though Sasha was scolding people now, it still felt like an Oriole was singing. Falstead ignored all of them, and actually carried the guests to charge forward. At that moment, Falstead suddenly heard the sound of his own horn from 20 meters away. Woo! Woo woo! One short, one long, one short. Huh! Wasn't that their squadron leader's signal to retreat? Woo woo woo, 3 long. This was an order for everyone to retreat together and prioritize protecting the important goods. The strong wind brought about by the high-speed flight made people's shouts almost inaudible. Only the sound of the horn was slightly clearer. The night also made it difficult for the other Griffin Knights to see Falstead's movements clearly. The Dwarven Knights were highly disciplined, so they chose to follow orders unconditionally. Falstead blew his beard and glared. Only then did he realize that Sasha had touched his horn and given the command without permission. Furthermore, the sound of the horn was right. Hee. Sasha raised the horn with one hand proudly. Luckily, Duque gave me a brocade pouch before we set off. He told me to open it when you didn't listen to orders. Send an order from the Alliance's Deputy Commander, Duke Marcus. He orders you, Falstead Dragoncatcher, to immediately descend the Griffin. Otherwise, he will have Sir Kudrin Wildhammer forbid you from ever flying again. Falstead was not afraid of anything. He was only afraid that he would not be allowed to fly again. The Wildhammer Knights who soared in the sky were not afraid of dying in the sky, but dying helplessly on their sickbeds. This time, Duque had really caught him at his Achilles' heel. Falstead knew that the situation was not good, but he could only give up on fighting the dragon. Damn it! If the dragon charges down like this, half of us will die. When that happens, you, the Deputy Commander, will have to take full responsibility. I don't care. Carry out the order. Sasha also understood that if she chose to retreat in this situation, it would only give the dragon a chance to take them down one by one. But some things were just like that. After going through the test of life and death, Sasha had an unprecedented feeling in her heart. That was unconditional trust in Duque, the fear of wandering in front of the gates to purgatory, the joy of narrowly escaping death, and the feeling of peace and warmth had long been deeply imprinted in the depths of Sasha's soul. She believed that she would never forget this complicated feeling for the rest of her life. I don't care if others believe it or not, I do. In the end, the Dwarven Griffin Squadron, which never backed down, actually ran away. This was out of the dragon's expectations, and also made the 2 red dragons extremely happy, because after giving up on speed, these griffins were no different from helpless chicks in the eyes of humans. Suddenly breaking through the dense clouds, the ruler of the sky, the dragon, with unparalleled dominance, proudly descended from the sky. Close. Even closer. In less than 30 breaths, they would be able to tear these annoying birds with little claws into pieces and scatter them in the air. Very suddenly, the 2 dragons felt that they were seeing things for a moment. Why are there so many griffins? Immediately, the dragons realized that it wasn't an illusion. The griffins swayed a few times and instantly, a large group of griffins appeared. Not just a dozen but more than 100. Not just the dragons, but even the griffins themselves were shocked by the additional companions and let out sharp cries. The knights had a slight headache, but they comforted their mounts. The dragons were dumbfounded. The younger dragon attacked first. It dove down, and with lightning speed, used its sharp claws to grab a griffin. Unexpectedly, not only did the griffin not feel any flesh being cut, it exploded instead. Bam! The explosion didn't cause any damage, but it scared the dragon. Yes, this was a classic case of the other party not wanting to talk to you, so he threw a self-destructing griffin at you. Unexpectedly, after one was blown up, more griffins flew out from the front. The older, more experienced, and more powerful dragon realized that this was a so-called illusion. It tried to determine whether the griffins were real from the sound they made when they flew. It failed. It was shocked to find that the 100 griffins actually made the sound of the wind breaking. The airwaves caused by high-speed flying could not be faked. Chapter 484. The giant dragon's eyes widened, filled with disbelief. Why did he have to make it look so real? The giant dragon felt like it had wasted its thousands of years of life. The giant dragon was dumbfounded. Falstead and Sasha were shocked as well. Sasha turned her head to look at Duque, only to see Duque smiling as he raised a finger. Two energies revolved around it obediently, wind and lightning. Sasha suddenly realized something. If Duque hadn't made a move, she would have forgotten that the Windrunner sisters weren't the only ones who had received the Storm Alter's power. From the start, Duque had gained the most benefits. However, Duque was in a high position, and he wasn't the kind of valiant general who led the charge, so he didn't have many opportunities to fool around. True mirror image gave Duque perfect visual deception. Power of Storm made Duque's counterfeiting skills even better. And the powerful Greatest King system gave Duque unparalleled control, making every illusion come to life. It could be said that other than those powerful beings who specialized in magic, no one could tell which of the griffins Duque had created was real, and which was fake. Not just the giant dragon, even Duque's own people worshipped Duque in their hearts. The beautiful eyes of the two elven ladies in the team flickered as they watched. A huge disadvantage was actually forcefully evened out by Duque. After all, they were in the sky. No matter how wide the dragon's breath was, it couldn't cover such a large area in one breath. Just when everyone thought that Duque was shameless, and the giant dragon couldn't do anything about it, the giant dragon made another move. The dazzling sparks lit up a large part of the sky. Every Griffin Knight suddenly turned around and saw hundreds of fireballs condensed in the air around the giant dragon's body. Even though it was flying at high speed, these strange fireballs didn't go out and danced around the giant dragon. Magic! A giant dragon that could use magic. The expressions on the faces of the dwarves were very ugly. It was already very difficult to be forced to fight against opponents that were many levels higher than oneself. This dragon could actually cast spells while flying at high speed? Judging from the appearance of those fireballs, they weren't ordinary goods. They were high-end goods created by draconic magic. Dragons were truly a race blessed by the heavens. Not only did they have a magic genius like Krasis, but they also had many freaks who practiced magic and martial arts at the same time. Under the illumination of the fire, the huge dragon's half-opened mouth reflected a dazzling, fierce light. Amidst the ferocious laughter, over 100 fireballs rained down on the group of griffins, at a speed even faster than the giant dragon's flight. I don't care if you're real or fake. As long as he was hit by that, he would be done for. When everyone looked at Duque again, Duque's pupils suddenly shrank. Good timing. In terms of the destructive power of magic, Duque admitted that he was no match for Marion. In terms of movement casting ability and control, Marion, a radiant moon, couldn't catch up to Duque, who had the assistance of the system. In Duque's retinas, countless thin lines extended from the fireballs, telling Duque the trajectory of each fireball, and the possible changes in direction due to the gale. In midair, countless hands of magic suddenly appeared. Almost at the same time, a large number of fireballs shot out to meet the flaming meteor shower falling from the sky. Boom! 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 A series of explosions sounded high in the sky behind them. The dwarven knights were dumbfounded. In their field of vision, it was the grandest fireworks in the night. The giant dragons were almost mad with anger. Without the urging of the orc knights behind them, the two dragons continued to dive at high speed. They wanted to see how these griffins, who had already dropped very low in altitude, could escape their hunt. Duque had a headache. His illusion wasn't without a distance limit. The limit distance in his retinas had always been clearly marked, and in this movement-casting state, a radius of 300 meters was the limit. He had no intention of sacrificing these griffin knights. But now, he suddenly discovered another problem. After the griffins successfully dropped his 5-man squad, they would inevitably be hunted down as soon as the griffins left the range of 300 meters. Don't think so much. As long as you're safe, our mission is done. Brothers and sisters, let's fight these big lizards to our heart's content. Falstead raised the Tempest hammer high. Sometimes, Duque couldn't help but complain that the Horde's cards were too damn good. The infantry was stronger than the alliance, and so was the air force. If Gul'dan hadn't rebelled, it wouldn't have been so easy for the alliance to turn from defense to offense. Duque thought of a new plan, a slightly risky but permanent solution. He once again set his sights on Marion, who wasn't good at movement casting. At this moment, a Crimson System alert suddenly popped up on Duque's retinas. Alert! Alert! Unknown super strong boss has entered the skies. Initial evaluation. Undefeatable skeleton. Immediate retreat is strongly recommended. Do you want to activate the boss battle module? Just as Duque raised his head in shock, a huge hole suddenly appeared in the thick clouds in the sky due to a violent storm. Moonlight shone down. Under the bright moonlight, a dark metallic figure that looked like a titan landed in the middle of the battle between the griffins and the giant red beast. What the hell is that? Falstead opened his mouth with difficulty, allowing the wild wind to pour into his throat. Even the radiant moon elven wizard who thought he had seen many things found himself trembling all over, unable to speak a single word. That young red dragon was already big enough, not the slightest bit inferior to the big red dragon that Duque and Marion had killed a few days ago. However, at this moment, a pair of black dragon wings that were almost 3 times the size of the red dragon filled everyone's field of vision. The dragon's wings flashed with a black metallic light, causing everyone to feel an indescribable sense of shock. A thunderous roar that seemed to even shake the night sky sounded out, the sound waves easily shattering all of Duque's illusions and pushing the griffins away. The sudden appearance of the black dragon almost caused the little red dragon to wet its pants due to the huge disparity in size. It had been so aggressive just a moment ago, but now it was no different from a pug that had seen a large beast. In the darkness, the black dragon's narrow eyes stared at the smaller red beast in front of it in disdain. The orc red dragon roared in a mournful voice, clearly aware that this fellow that had appeared was definitely not on its side. The 4 dragons were of the same breath and branches. The problem was that these 4 colors did not include black. I'm very sorry, but we might be finished, my elf lady. Falstead looked like he was about to write his will. Chapter 485. The black dragon spread its wings that seemed to be able to cover the entire night sky, and let out a low, mocking laugh from its huge mouth, waking up every tiny existence. Sasha looked up again. Her eyes widened as she saw a terrifying face. Beneath the pair of huge horns was a pair of narrow, gem-like eyes that shone with a ferocious light. 4 strong limbs that were filled with explosive power, sharp claws, and a bloody mouth that was spewing golden flames of death. Under the night sky, its crimson stripes gave it a terrifying appearance that was beyond imagination. It was like a legendary devil, but what attracted her attention the most was that everything he could see was metal. The metal that was plated and emitted a strange metallic luster under the faint moonlight almost covered the black dragon's entire body. As long as one reached the young dragon level, the natural dragon scales that dragons were born with had proven to be immune to most mortal weapons. Even ballistae could not penetrate the dragon's natural scales. Why did this dragon have to wear armor to protect itself? What kind of metal was this armor made of? There was no answer. Everyone was fine, but she had never seen metal like this. Sasha did not have the urge to shoot at it, but she instinctively felt that even if she did, it would be a waste of effort. This metal armor clearly conveyed a sense of trance. It had a strength that could not be penetrated by mortal power, and only a very powerful and self-centered dragon would endure the pain of having its body embedded in the alloy. Wings of Death. Sasha repeated the nightmarish name softly. Wings of Death, Neltharion. In the legends of the elves, there were a total of 5 great dragon aspects that represented mystery and the power of nature a long time ago. Some legends claimed that the red Alexstrasza symbolized the true meaning of life. The other dragon aspects knew very little about them. The elves had already felt their influence, and had even come into contact with them on different occasions. But the elven elders had never leaked more information about dragons. However, among the dragons, there was already one that the world was familiar with. It had told the world in its own way before the other dragons. Although it originally had its own name, It chose Deathwing as its title in order to better despise the weaker ones around it. Deathwing did his best to destroy the worlds built by elves, humans, and dwarfs. Even the oldest elven elder didn't know why Deathwing did this. In private, the elves gave it another name, the Forgotten Dragon aspect. It was a short sentence, but it contained many meanings: abandoned responsibility, chaos, betrayal, and anger. If Alexstrasza represented the true meaning of life, then Deathwing represented the power of destruction. However, such a giant dragon was soaring in front of them, as if it was protecting them in its own way. Of course, there was another possibility. Deathwing did not seem to notice the existence of Sasha and the Griffin Knights at all. Only the red dragon in front of it could be called its opponent, because Deathwing hated its kind of other colors, to the point that if other dragons were to come into contact with it, they would be mercilessly torn apart. A moment ago, the two red dragons were still chasing prey that was smaller than them, like cats chasing mice. A moment later, the prey became themselves. Deathwing stirred up a huge gust of wind, like a curtain of night covering the earth. He rushed past the Griffin Knights in an instant and attacked the other side. In just one move, the smaller dragon was torn in half by the huge right claw of the wings of death. In the eyes of mortals, the huge young red dragon was like a broken toy that had been thrown away. Flesh and scales flew everywhere, and it did not even cry out as it fell to the ground just like that. What terrifying lethality! The mortals below were dumbfounded. Unbelievable, Falstead mumbled. We were actually saved by the legendary dragon of extreme evil, Deathwing. The sudden scream was like a slap to his face. He turned his head, and there was nothing in the direction of the scream. However, in the other corner of his vision, he saw the tragic state of his companion. Flames. Just the flames that escaped when the wings of death swept across the sky had already caused the death of a dwarf knight and the griffin beneath him. 10 meters away, Falstead watched helplessly as his companion was set ablaze by an evil flame in front of him. It was just a tiny spark, but after touching a human body, the fire suddenly grew many times stronger. From a single spark, it turned into a prairie fire. The high temperature that followed burned the dwarf and the griffin's fur in the fire. Their skin peeled off, revealing their burning muscles, bones, and organs. Then, their blood evaporated and turned to ash. For a moment, Falstead and Sasha were stunned in midair. Heavens, how many people had been hit? An elf and a dwarf started to panic at the same time. They twisted their necks and moved their eyes to search at their limits. Seeing Marion cry out in alarm, Sasha jumped down herself. As a mage with the godly skill Slowfall, Marion's jump was more daunting than dangerous. She saw Gavinrad. The griffin that the Holy Knight was riding on was probably done for. But the Holy Light saved his life again. He seemed to have activated Holy Shield. And after withstanding the flames for a moment, another skilled dwarf knight caught up with the falling Gavinrad and saved him. Ronan's griffin was blown away by the wind. It could be seen that the dwarf knight was doing his best to help the griffin regain its balance. Even though it was a mess, it was not in any danger. Duque? Where's Duque? Suddenly, Sasha's heart was seized by fear. The dragon roar in the sky attracted everyone's attention again. Deathwing and the red dragon roared at each other, the deafening roar getting louder and louder. A few seconds later, the two dragons collided in midair. In that moment, all the dark clouds in the sky seemed to be swept away by the wind caused by their collision. They both flashed their claws and used their long tails to attack each other crazily. Their tails were more than 10 meters long, scarier than any siege hammer in the world. If they were hit, even a small hill would crumble in the blink of an eye. This wasn't a battle that humans could imagine just by listening to the bard's descriptions. The destructive power that the giant dragons displayed made Sasha think of the legendary god of destruction, who specialized in destruction for a moment. Chapter 486. Roar. A savage, angry roar once again drew everyone's attention back to the sky. The battle for the King of the Air had begun as everyone had expected. The red dragon that was caught seemed to want to escape. It tried to go around Deathwing from the side. However, the opponent's larger body was undoubtedly a huge obstacle that couldn't be avoided. The bats on Deathwing's wings were like a city wall, covering the young red dragon's entire field of vision. It gave the red dragon the feeling that it couldn't pass without defeating the opponent. A dragon breath came out. The confused red dragon seemed to want to use fire to burn Deathwing's bats. Deathwing let out a scornful laugh. This was clear mockery. It flapped its wings, like extinguishing a tiny flame on a candle. Just a strong flap of its wings was enough to disperse the dragon breath. To the griffins, this larger crimson dragon was undoubtedly the most experienced one. However, against the more experienced and sharp ancient dragon guardian, its attacks were as childish as a baby's. When it spat out the dragon's breath, it revealed a flaw. The wing closest to the wings of death easily became the target of the attack. Originally, Deathwing only needed to stretch out its left claw to cut through its wing and greatly reduce its opponent's mobility in the air. Unexpectedly, Deathwing chose to tighten its left claw and retract it to its chest. Instead, it gave up on what was close at hand and swung its tail at the red dragon, causing it to move away from itself. This action was too uncoordinated. If one didn't see it clearly, they would think that its left claw was heavily injured in the previous battle and couldn't move. Deathwing wasn't injured, but why did it retreat? At first, Sasha thought she was seeing things. However, after watching, she realized that Deathwing's attack pattern was indeed very strange. As an ancient dragon that lived by fighting, Deathwing used all of its weapons, mouth, tail, wings, left and right legs, and right claw to attack. Except for its left claw, Deathwing's storm-like agility showed that it wasn't injured, but its left claw was still stuck to its body. No matter how one looked at it, it gave off an incongruous feeling of an expert bullying an amateur. I'll let you have a one-handed advantage. Obviously, Deathwing wasn't the kind of dragon that had the demeanor of a strong. This could be seen from the fact that he instantly killed a young dragon at the beginning of the battle. Why? Sasha said to herself. Why did he do that? Falstead thought Sasha was complaining about him flying away from the battlefield. Sorry, he replied loudly. This is not a battle for mortals. And there is nothing we can do here but wait to die. Elf lady, you'd better hold on to the griffin's saddle. The first thing we need to do now is to get out of here. Leave here. What about Duque? The words pierced the weakest part of Windsor's heart. No. Wait a minute. Where was Duque? Where's Duque? Sasha screamed and shook the dwarf's shoulder. She didn't even know when she started crying. Falstead, are you going to abandon you and my companions because of fear? Turning around and seeing Sasha's tears, the dwarf's heart broke. Fear? No. Falstead had never been afraid of death. The problem was that everyone who was still alive was here. He finished it with a single glance. Your man is nowhere to be found. This has nothing to do with cowardice. Those who aren't here are all dead. They've turned to ashes, you know that. The dwarf waved his empty fist in excitement. His rough face was also streaked with tears. Sasha was also in a state of excitement. She didn't even notice the change in the dwarf's way of addressing Duque. At this moment, the battle in the sky came to an end. Deathwing took advantage of its immature opponent's mistake and used its longer tail to hook its opponent's head. The red dragon lost its balance in the air. The huge black dragon wings with dark red veins instantly surrounded the red dragon. Its right claw suddenly tore open the red dragon's bat wings, causing the red dragon's nervous attempt to regain its balance to fail. Under the fierce pull, the red dragon's defenseless back was exposed, as well as its neck that seemed to be waiting for a guillotine to fall. Fly quick! 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 Falstead urged his griffin. If we don't leave now, we're all dead. The griffin used all its strength to fly away from the battlefield as fast as it could, even at the risk of cramping in the next moment. Sasha twisted her head and stared at the battle behind her. Deathwing bit down on the red dragon's neck, and there was the sound of chewing immediately. The sound traveled far in the dark night. The sound of flesh and blood splattering. The sound of bones breaking. Everything sounded so creepy. Then, with the help of her night vision, Sasha saw a dark red drizzle fall. Blood sprayed from the dragon's neck. The red dragon tried to twist its body, trying its best to escape Deathwing's attack. It struggled with all its might in vain. In the end, it still fell from the sky dejectedly. The seemingly intense battle only lasted for less than 2 minutes. No, it was even shorter, not even a minute. In such a short period of time, the 2 red dragons that were enough to destroy the entire Griffin squadron were killed effortlessly by the wings of death. It's over. It's going to be our turn soon. Falstead muttered in despair. What was strange was that Deathwing did not have any intention of chasing after the griffins. It only stared at its left claw in front of its chest, as if there was something inside it. What was it? Or was it someone? The black dragon did not even look at the griffins that were running away in panic. Suddenly, it turned towards the giant rock dam in the southeast of the wetland and flew away. When its huge figure disappeared from the Elven Ranger's sight, Sasha noticed that its left claw was still closed, as if it was protecting something precious. The Windrunner's third sister finally realized what was on Deathwing's claw. Duque, Deathwing has captured Duque. Falstead, we have to catch up to it. The dwarf looked at Sasha in disbelief. His mouth was so wide open from shock that it looked like a 7-pound cannon shell could be stuffed inside. When he saw the determination on Sasha's face that she really wanted him to approach the ancient ferocious beast, he gulped and said, I am indeed a brave warrior, my elf lady. But I have to remind you that this is too crazy. Chapter 487. Duque is in Deathwing's claw. That's why Deathwing doesn't use his left claw to attack. Sasha pointed this out loudly. It's a pity. Maybe we have to mourn the losses of the highest-ranking leaders of the Alliance and the Horde. Falstead sighed. Maybe Deathwing doesn't like dragon meat and just wants to keep a human as a snack? Damn it. If you say that again, I'll strangle you here. Sasha showed a rare fierceness, scaring the dwarf into shrinking his neck. No, wait. Deathwing didn't kill Duque on the spot. That means Duque is useful to him. Right. That must be it. At this moment, Sasha almost clapped her hands and cheered for her intelligence. The dwarf poured cold water on her. By the way, didn't Sir Marcus give you 2 colorful things before you took off? I think he said something about the second pouch to be opened when there's danger? Pouch? Sasha didn't know why a man like Duque would make such a fancy thing. When she questioned Duque, this despicable fellow said that it was some kind of pig, some kind of feeling, and some kind of pretentiousness. Anyway, Sasha didn't understand anything. But this didn't stop Sasha from blushing. Yes, when there was danger just now, she should have opened the pouch. She didn't expect to forget everything in her nervousness. On the griffin against the strong wind, Sasha opened the pouch made of white gauze from her bag. There was a line of words written on it. If I'm captured by Deathwing, please don't worry. There's also a small chance that Ronan will be captured. Of course, if that's the case, you might not open the pouch. Seeing the incongruous smiley face at the end of the sentence, Sasha suddenly burst into laughter. What's wrong? Falstead was stunned. Why did this female elf look so beautiful like a goddess? Was she actually not a goddess, but a neurotic one? Sasha didn't answer the dwarf's question, and fell into deep thought. Could it be that Duque already knew the truth about the Red Dragon Queen's capture? Could it be that Duque had already predicted that he would be captured by Deathwing? But what did this have to do with Ronan? Her messy thoughts almost drove Sasha crazy. If they hadn't spent some time together. If Duque wasn't her lord. If he wasn't her sister's lover. If he hadn't saved her life. Sasha might have suspected that the person she had been trying to save had sold his soul to the evil Deathwing. What does it want you to do, Duque? Sasha murmured. Or rather, what does it want from you? Thinking back to Duque's position and importance in the Alliance, Sasha felt a chill run down her spine. What was worse than the death of the Alliance's vice commander due to a curse? That was the Alliance vice commander becoming an undying or something, defecting to the enemy and falling. Each of the 5 primordial dragon guardians had their own unique and unparalleled powers. In the eyes of mortals, that was already godly power. Who knew if Deathwing had the power to resurrect the dead or something like that? Actually, Sasha was thinking too much. Netheria was never that way. The more concerned one was, the easier it was to overthink. After an unknown amount of time, Duque woke up. His back was stinging, not because he was injured, but purely because of the tree roots and pebbles he was leaning against. Thinking back, ever since he was tricked by Ghoul Dan and was forced into a life countdown, he hadn't had a good night's sleep. Camping was a common occurrence. Ever since entering the wetland, he had settled down with the dwarves for 2 days. There were some benefits, such as being able to see Sasha's delicate and curious face every morning when he woke up. Even though he knew that she was his sister-in-law, it didn't stop Duque from using her to reminisce about Aurelia. He knew Aurelia's temperament. Such a strong-willed heroine wouldn't fall in love easily. Once she did, if he died, even if Aurelia didn't die with him, she would be a widow for the rest of her life. Sensing the recent changes in Sasha, Duque realized that he was also a sinner. It was one thing to settle the big sister, but how did he get involved with his sister-in-law? When he opened his eyes, there was obviously nothing good in front of him. It was still night in his field of vision. The rolling dark clouds in the sky added a dark aura to the world. He was in the middle of a forest, but it was dead silent everywhere. There were no animals moving in the forest, and there were no frogs croaking in summer. No, there weren't even insects chirping. There was nothing but the frightening sound of the cold wind. Even though he was mentally prepared, the oppressive ominous feeling still made Duque feel suffocated. "Oh, you're awake. I was thinking of spells that could wake you up in advance without hurting you. Unfortunately, all I know are large-scale destructive spells, and nothing is suitable for this situation. This makes me very annoyed." Wings of Death. Duque turned his head to look in front of him. Actually, he had already checked the moment he opened his eyes. There was nothing there, and a black shadow quickly appeared out of thin air. In just 3 seconds it formed a hooded figure. The black figure in front of him looked like a clumsy mirror clone, created by an unqualified mage. However, there wouldn't be any clone in the world that had such high purity of dark energy, and there wouldn't be a clone that was filled with the arrogance of the standard version of Long Outian. It had nothing to do with the appearance. Just the dark energy that was leaking out and turning into a solid form was proof enough. The thing that looked like a human continued to change. It was like a high-speed 3D printer was working, and the black shadow formed a more complete silhouette. A face appeared from under the hood. It was a calm, handsome, and confident man. His face was no different from the nobles of Rotterdam. At least that was how it looked on the surface. "Duke Marcus, are you all right? I've confirmed that you're not seriously injured. After all, it's not easy for me to control my strength with those big claws of mine. It's still in one piece. But speaking of which, if I go back and check on any injuries, if I need to send you my medical bills, where can I send them to, Mr. Wings of Death?" Duque replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The corners of his thin lips curled up slightly, forming a stiff and mean smile. The Wings of Death, who had transformed into a human, smiled and asked, "Since you know who I am, it's easy." Chapter 488. A Man and a Dragon. One was sitting on the ground, and the other was standing on the grass. Just like that, they confronted each other. Suddenly, Deathwing said, "You're not planning to attack me or try to escape?" Duque blurted out, "Why should I attack you or try to escape?" Deathwing was a little speechless. In his expectations, this young human would most likely panic after encountering him. He would either attack him like a madman, or try to run away while wetting his pants. Duque's calmness was beyond his expectations. In fact, at this time, Duque was madly complaining in his heart. "Attack you? I'm not an idiot who thinks I'm cute after eating some retard today. To deal with you, even in the game, I'd have to gather 25 companions who could kill gods and ghosts. I'm not stupid enough to kill an epic-level boss as an elite monster. Of course, there's no need to mention escaping. If magic wasn't taken into account, in terms of speed alone, there was really no creature in this world that could be faster than the Black Dragon King. Therefore Duke, who was a transmigrator, calmly faced the Wing of Death Nesario. The incarnation of the Black Dragon sat down in front of Duque. It was unknown whether he was sitting on a chair that appeared out of thin air, an invisible stool, or a large rock. Anyway, because it was blocked by the robe, there was no way to see it. Deathwing's dark and bright eyes stared unblinkingly at Duque. He tried to kill anyone he stared at with his eyes, completely suppressing Duque in terms of aura. If Deathwing's eyes had the power of something like shadow flame or deep breath, Duque might have knelt on the ground and shouted, "Tycoon, please let me hug your thigh." Since he was prepared, Duque certainly wouldn't give in so easily. He cheated. Nesario did not know what Duque did. He only knew that the eyes of the human in front of him became slightly hollow. For a moment, he almost thought that the Duque in front of him was not a living human. Deathwing started to feel a little annoyed or impatient. Fortunately, just as Deathwing was about to go berserk, because he could not suppress this pitiful low-level creature in his eyes, Duque seemed to involuntarily avert his gaze. Deathwing rarely felt a sense of joy from winning. Very good, you at least know how to show respect and humility to a greater existence than you, Deathwing said arrogantly. This is a very good start. Duque remained silent. Of course, in his heart, it was a completely different matter. Bastard black-skinned lizard. Hurry up and hand over the item and scram. Otherwise, don't blame me for chopping off your head and hanging it on the city gates of Stormwind City. Do you hear me, Nesario? Deathwing said to himself. But in case you do something inappropriate, it's better for me to warn you in advance. A rock on the left of Duque suddenly began to burn. Then it melted in front of his eyes. The melted rock instantly turned into magma. The magma did not flow to the ground and simply spread. Instead, under the guidance of a mysterious force, it quickly circled around Duque and the man behind Duque. A huge circle of lava, with a radius of about 2 meters, surrounded Duque. Then, the lava disappeared quickly and completely, as fast as the rock melted in the beginning. The whole process only took a few seconds. Duque was already on a cylindrical ground separated by a deep trench. The nemesis of the orcs, the savior of the humans, the deputy commander of the Great Lordaeran Alliance, Duke Marcus. At this point, Deathwing paused clearly, but his next words clearly told Duque that he had said so much about Duque's name before was purely sarcastic. Because his next words were, "If I wanted to, this would be your end." Well, full of arrogance, full marks. But Duque was unhappy, and he cursed in his heart, "Deathwing, I'll *CK all the women in your family." Deathwing could not read minds. He was very satisfied with the trembling of Duque's body and the beads of cold sweat that dripped from his forehead. This misunderstanding stems from a lack of understanding of each other. You humans know too little about the dragon race. Duque seemed to be suppressing the fear in his heart and sneered. Are you sure dragons don't turn humans, who intend to communicate with dragons, into snacks? Duque's joke seemed to be too cold and not funny at all. But Deathwing was very happy. He actually laughed, and his laughter became louder and louder. He became more and more excited, to the point of madness. I remember now. I did do this before. I quickly gave up this method. Human meat is too little, too fragile, and not chewy at all. Deathwing admitted this without hiding it. This made Duque's disgust for Deathwing rise to another level. In his heart, Duque kept muttering something about dark fire Titahack step of time. Something about essence of destruction. Something about dark fire blazing dragon's reigns. Well, if Deathwing knew what these things were, he would immediately change back to his original form and slap Duque to death. These items were dropped by Deathwing when he was knocked down in the game. Of course, Deathwing, who did not know that Duque was constantly courting death in his heart, was happy to exert his majesty and terror on this insignificant human. He sat down and stretched out a hand, palm facing up. Above his palm, an image suddenly jumped out. A tiny dragon-shaped image flew in a lush green world. Those dragons were of all kinds of colors, like a 7-colored rainbow. An overwhelming sense of joy filled the air, and even Duke felt a wave of emotion. Ah, Jurassic Park. Deathwing's voice reminded Duque of the famous commentary in the animal world. At that time, the world was ours, and we protected it well. Magic was ours, and we guarded it well. Life was ours, and we reveled in it. Then other inferior species appeared, forms that made us nauseous, lives that were too brief to be worth mentioning. They were reckless and reckless, always reckless without considering the consequences. Because of their stupidity, they attracted the demons. Duque spread his hands in his heart. I'm not going to take the blame for Savis and Queen Azhara. If it weren't for the efforts of our dragon race, this world would have been destroyed long ago. Even 10,000 Lordaeran alliances can't compare to the challenges we once faced. Dragon race. It was our dragon race who worked together to drive the demons out of this world. Deathwing waved his arms excitedly. Duque touched his chin. Well, with a mustache, he could cosplay as Germany's Führer. Chapter 489. Deathwing looked at Duque. His dark eyes emitted some kind of psychedelic light as he stared straight into Duque's eyes. The era of our dragon race is over. Elves, then dwarves, and finally humans. They wantonly occupied every corner of this world. Our numbers are decreasing, and what's worse is that we are fighting and killing each other. No. That's just because you tried to kill everyone and were discovered to be cheating. As a result, you were hunted down by 4 families. We clearly made such a great sacrifice together to protect this beautiful world. Why do we have to fight each other? Damn, you can even say such artistic words. Boss Nasario, I don't think the commercial little golden man is suitable for you. How about the Berlin Silver Bear Award for Best Male Pig Trotters? Misleading ideas, bad communication. Yo, I have a phone number for communication, 10086. Do you want it? Sigh, there are too many reasons. Even if I have time to explain it to you, as a human, you won't understand it all. Well, don't talk nonsense anymore. Let's do it directly. Hand over the thing, and we will disband and never see each other again. Good for you, good for me, and good for everyone. Wings of Death raised his head 45 degrees, looking like he was bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind. Those 2 drops of tears were enough to make him a sad, beautiful man. As he sighed, the psychedelic color in his eyes became even more intense. Because of those reasons, our numbers have become so few. His gaze turned, and the sadness in his eyes became more intense. He seemed to have seen through Duque's thoughts. The past is the past. The world is always improving. I am willing to make up for the mistakes of the past, for the future of the world and the dragon race, to fight against the evil orcs. Duque, I am willing to help you rescue the captured red dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Ah, I believe it. If I were a blind native, and not a transmigrator, I might really believe it. Unfortunately, I am a transmigrator. Even if I were blind, I wouldn't dare to believe a word from a psychopath like you. I'm sorry, Boss Nasario. In the spiritual world, Duque looked at the various notifications from the system, while making his facial muscles show both touched and dazed expressions. Deathwing was very satisfied with Duque's reaction. He stretched out a hand, and in his palm was a small silver talisman that looked like a badge. Duque seemed to be possessed. His fingers stretched out spontaneously, grabbed the talisman and took it. Duque looked down at the amulet and carefully examined the magic runes engraved on the edge of it, as well as the black crystal in the center. He could recognize some of the runes, and he seemed to have seen some in the books of Karazhan, but he had never seen most of the runes that belonged to the dragon language. Even so, Duque could still feel the powerful magic coming from it. This was a mana that far surpassed Wizard Chun Xing's. Radiant moons, no, even Breaking Dawn wizards might not be able to control it. You will successfully liberate Alexstrasza, my obedient little puppet. After abandoning the hypocritical mask, a strange and human smile appeared on Deathwing's face. As long as I have this, I can be with you and guide you step by step towards victory, and the destruction of the Alliance and the Horde. After an unknown amount of time, Duque was still standing there like a block of wood. Looking at the words of the system notification, Duque did not dare to move at all. He could only pretend to be an amusing idiot who was really hypnotized. He stood there foolishly, eating the slightly hot night wind as his supper. System notification. The skeleton boss Deathwing has left. You have successfully removed the boss battle template. It was only when he saw this notification that Duque completely relaxed and collapsed to the ground. Duque panted heavily and asked, "System Elf, has this thing been blocked?" The System Elf replied, "All signals sent from this talisman will be delayed by 10 minutes. When necessary, I will perform illusion projection on it." That's good. Just now Duque was really walking on a tightrope. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was dancing on the tip of a knife in front of the gates of hell. That's right, from the beginning to the end, Duque was waiting for Deathwing to appear. Only Deathwing was the key to saving Alexstrasza, and also the key to saving his life. The so-called history had long been changed beyond recognition by Duque, the troublesome butterfly. Saving the Red Dragon Queen in advance, Duque really did not have the confidence to provoke Deathwing. To be honest, from the moment they entered the wetlands, everything that Duque did was to provoke this black dragon boss to come out. Even if he killed the powerful young red dragon Gazela, it was just to prove his worth to the wings of death. Duque was not completely sure that Deathwing would find him, and not the original protagonist of this incident, Ronan. So even if the unreliable Ronan was a mascot, Duque had to bring Ronan along. Now it was proven that Duque's risk was right. In the original history, it was because there was no other reliable person to save Alexstrasza that Deathwing found Ronan, which later led to the story of the legendary mage Ronan. At this point in time, there was a better and more powerful Duque, so why not use Deathwing? Moreover, according to the sinister and cunning Deathwing's methods, as the Alliance's deputy commander, Duque was much more useful than a mere Ronin. In fact, as long as he survived Deathwing's mind control and was not discovered, Duque was extremely safe. However, was it so easy to deceive a special existence that was a super boss level in the game? Duque had prepared a lot for this. His greatest preparation and greatest reliance was his one and only system. Since the system could be independent of his thoughts, manage the magic transmission for him, and even repeat the incantation in his mind to cast spells, Duque boldly set up a thinking shell for himself that wrapped around his soul. Simply put, all information from the outside world that attempted to enter Duque's mind would first be filtered by the system, and after a strict but rapid review, it would enter Duque's mind after about a second of delay. Any information from the outside world would first be strictly screened by the system, first converted into simple text and graphics, and finally converted into bioelectronic signals, which were laughed at by Duque's brain. Relying on this preparation, Duque immediately discovered what Deathwing had done to him: hypnosis. This was not an ordinary weak hypnosis. It was also not some kind of psychological suggestion. This was a unique brainwashing thought that came from the ancient god N'Zoth. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a brainwashing program. Chapter 490. That year in the ancient times, Nesario was still a good young man. He diligently followed the orders of the Titans of creation and guarded the land of Azeroth day after day, until he found some prisons in the depths of the earth where the ancient gods were imprisoned, and then he was shot. The ancient gods began to whisper to him, even though they were separated by the prison cage. Even though he had left the prison area, they were still whispering to him. They whispered to Nesario with a continuous chain of incantations that were more terrifying than Tang Seng and Journey to the West. Just imagine, anyone would be in a trance if someone kept repeating, "You're a lowly," in their ear for 20 minutes. Not to mention being called at such a high frequency for who knows how many years. The ancient gods gradually eroded Nesario's heart. They made Nesario believe that as long as he destroyed all the other races in Azeroth, he could let his Black Dragon Legion rule the world and enslave the Green Dragon Queen Isra and the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Now the Amulet of Deathwing had a similar effect on Duque's brainwashing. It was a low-frequency speech that would not be perceived by the human auditory system. It seemed that people could not hear it, but in fact the brain would still be able to sense it. Seeing the system prompt translated into the common language, Duque chuckled. "You, Duke Marcus, is the most loyal servant of the great Deathwing. My orders are the highest meaning of your life. As long as I give you an order, Even if I want you to kill your dearest person, you will do it unconditionally and without hesitation. My will is your will. My enemy is your enemy. After reading this message that kept appearing in the system prompt, Duque curled his lips. You should have added, it's not me that's wrong, it's the world. Host, how should I deal with it? Continue to receive it. But in order to avoid being discovered by that stupid dragon, don't block it. Every time you accumulate 1,000 of the same message, delete it automatically. When you find a new command, filter it and notify me. Understood, host. Looking at the darkness around him, Duque suddenly felt a little envious of the elves' ability to see in the dark. In a primeval forest where one couldn't even see their own fingers in front of them, walking at night would either mean encountering ghosts, or stepping on some terrible snakes and insects, and getting bitten instead. Duque shuddered, and gave up on the idea of walking at night. He found a small tree hole, and used the power of the storm to remove the stains inside. After asking the system elf to stand guard, he went to sleep. After a night of tossing and turning, Duque was also exhausted. The next morning, when Duque woke up, he felt as if he had aged another year. This was not an illusion. The curse from the demon king Sargeras was still devouring his life force. Calculating with his fingers, he realized that he had spent a few days wandering in Rotterdam, 2 days on the road, 4 days after entering the wetland, and 3 days at Muradin's place. 2 weeks passed in a flash. In the countdown timer, he only had 2 weeks to live. Holy F***ck. Let's see if Krasis is good or not. If he isn't, yours truly is going to turn into a ghoul. In history, even someone as perfect as Queen Sylvia didn't dare to see her own sister after becoming the Forgotten Queen. If he really became a ghoul, even Aurelia probably wouldn't be able to bear it. He had to hurry. Who knew what other tricks would come out of it? He tidied himself up. Well, if I don't make the first contact, I guess Deathwing won't be at ease with me. System Elf, start the quarantine procedure. Yes. After gently instructing the System Elf, an idea arose in Duque's mind. How should I go to grim battle? This was an experiment, and Duque also knew that he was playing with fire. If he was exposed at this point in time, he would probably end up dead. Duke's heart was filled with thrill and excitement, as if he was on a crazy roller coaster. It was the feeling of dancing on the tip of a knife, playing on a tightrope without any insurance in a sea of fire. Every cell in his body was jumping with excitement, and every inch of his flesh and bones seemed to be on fire. I'm willing to bet that with Deathwing's insidious and cunning personality, even if he left, he definitely wouldn't have gone far. That bastard is definitely hiding nearby, and once he feels that something is wrong with me, he will immediately run over and kill me. Duque muttered to himself. While muttering, he couldn't wait to see the results. In the sea of consciousness, Duque sent the system prompt. How should I go to grim battle? He clicked send. Almost as soon as this thought was sent out, the talisman that Deathwing sent out reacted. A video file was stuffed into the system's quarantine area. He didn't know if it was the system elf's bad taste, but this guy made the video into a file, and the F***king file name was Deathwing01. MP4. After glancing at it, Duque was speechless. System, if you're so awesome, why the F***ck aren't you the sequel to the M2SD Blu-ray movie? Although he was complaining, Duque still clicked on the video. In the spiritual world, Duque had an additional window. The eye-catching woodland just happened to appear in the video. However, this video was a 3-dimensional image. Duque gritted his teeth and let the video directly enter his brain. Out of the woodland there was a rocky wasteland. On the wasteland, there was a barren path that was probably trodden out by dwarven hunters. Through this path, he could reach Grim Battle, and the mountain where the beastmen imprisoned the Red Dragon Queen. Looking at the direction of the sun and Grim Battle, Duque immediately knew his approximate location. Deathwing took him very far, from the middle of the wetlands to the mountains in the southeast of the wetlands, probably between Grim Battle and the Boulder Dam. This not only saved him a few days of travel, but the most important thing was that going this way meant that he could perfectly avoid the Horde's formation at the foot of Grim Battle Fortress. After all, there were 100,000 Horde there, He didn't know how many there were, so he couldn't run away from the word no less. Although this path was a mountain road, as long as he was diligent, he could reach grim battle in 2 or 3 days. The image was jumping, and in the next instant, the image of the surroundings of Grim Badawa immediately appeared in the image. Before Duque could react, the video began to move. It moved slowly at first, then faster and faster. It was obvious that this view from a bird's eye view wasn't human. It was probably recorded by Deathwing, using some special aerial photography method. The video kept following a small path, and quickly passed through the forest to a rocky area. There it turned and continued to speed up. The cliffs and valleys quickly receded, and the trees became a blur. Chapter 491. The image was too fast, and Duque's brain could not keep up at all. It was like buying a clumsy VR virtual reality game helmet, and Duque felt dizzy watching it. Duque had to hold onto the tree trunk next to him in reality to prevent himself from falling to the ground. The hill gradually became tall and steep, and finally became the first row of mountains. At this time, the speed of the image did not slow down. In the end, it suddenly stopped at a special mountain peak. Although Duque felt a little hesitant, his gaze was immediately forcibly pulled over. At the foot of the mountain, Duque's perspective suddenly rose to the sky, so fast that he almost lost his balance. The image climbed up the mountain, and during this period, it deliberately let the mage observe places with footholds and handrails. It continued to rise, and finally reached the entrance of a narrow cave. Suddenly, the three-dimensional image disappeared. It was like Duque was playing a game when it suddenly popped up, leaving Duque in a daze in the spiritual world. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Coming out of the isolated state of the spiritual world, Duque found himself shivering in the middle of the forest at dawn. Almost immediately Duque felt the gaze again. Even though that person had done it very secretively, the system still faithfully recorded it down. The Deathwing Nesario glanced at you. Duque walked along the route indicated by Deathwing, and when he was about to walk out of the forest, the system prompted again. Deathwing glanced at him. Duque was on fire. Damn it! No one ever told me that Deathwing was a peeping Tom. Duque was annoyed. Originally, Duque almost wanted to curse out loud. However, he remembered that Ronan was even more miserable in history. He was escorted by Deathwing the whole time, completely losing his freedom like a slave. Thinking of this, Duque felt much better. Perhaps it was because Ronan had no status at that time, and Deathwing took a fancy to Ronan purely because Ronan was carrying out this mission. He also ordered Ronan to do this, and that without hesitation. But Duque was different. The biggest difference between him and Ronan was fame and experience. Now, Duque's reputation had already surpassed Lothar's, and he was second only to the leader of the alliance, Tarina's king. Also, after experiencing the destruction of his country, forming an alliance and persisting in the war, Deathwing probably thought that he was a man with an extremely firm mind. That was why he did not directly coerce him, but used the method of brainwashing and guidance. As long as he rescued Alexstrasza and obtained that item, Deathwing's scheme would be considered to have succeeded. Moreover, Duque's identity was even better than Ronan's. This identity could make Deathwing's plot in the original space-time smoother and more perfect. Duque had a headache. The current situation was that he had indeed obtained the most crucial piece of the puzzle in this incident. However, Deathwing was trying to force him to quickly run to grim battle to complete his mission. If he foolishly ran to complete his mission, then Duque might really be able to save the dying Red Dragon Queen. This way, the biggest beneficiary would undoubtedly be Deathwing. According to Duque's character of plucking feathers from geese that could kill 10,000 orcs, he would definitely not kill 9,999 orcs. Would he let himself be taken advantage of, and let Deathwing, the psychopath, laugh out loud? No, definitely not. He would rather work himself than let Nesario, the psychopath, have a good time. Duque had a plan. On the other side, Sasha and Falstad had almost caught up to Duque. They were not chasing after the Black Dragon King's ass, nor were they chasing after Falstad's griffins until they vomited blood, nor were they elven rangers trying to save the hero. Instead, they lined up neatly and followed. Yes, follow. Sasha, Gavin Rad, Ronan, Marion, and a team of 6 griffin riders. We're very close. Sasha, who was flying at the front, gestured. Immediately, the group of griffins began to slow down and descend. After descending to the ground and landing on solid ground again, both Gavin Rad and the griffin he was riding felt a sense of relief. The griffin grumbled in dissatisfaction. Gavin Rad, who was fully armed, was too heavy. The griffin gave Gavin Rad a look of disdain. The dwarf had no choice but to pat the griffin's neck and let it go out to hunt. It was not easy to feed a griffin. Griffins ate a lot of meat, and using sliced meat for a long time would reduce the griffin's ferocity and combat ability. The best way was to let the griffin forage on its own in a forest with plenty of prey. The smart griffins would return on their own after eating their fill. The remaining 4 members of Duque's rescue team gathered together. Gavin Rad put his hands on his hips and asked, "All right, let me ask you something. How did you know our boss was here?" Sasha raised the pouch that Duque had given her and smiled. That guy said that in order to make this pouch look impressive, he used the most special material. What material? A very special spice. You guys might not be able to feel it, but with my wind perception, this thing is as eye-catching as a lighthouse in the dark. Wow! Gavin Rad whistled. All right, let's follow them and see what happened between Duque and the Black Dragon King. Saying this, Sasha narrowed her eyes. The observant Marion discovered that Sasha's pupils started to expand after shrinking, revealing a completely different color, green. Sasha was concentrating her mind. This would blur the boundaries of her vision, but the focal point of her vision would become clearer, and many things that ordinary people could not see would appear. For example, there was a fog-like golden substance floating in the air. The continuous floating substance formed a long ribbon that floated past her head and extended into the depths of the forest. It did not take long for Sasha to find the place where Duque had chatted with Deathwing the night before. Duque was indeed here. Sasha observed the ground and mumbled, "This is his boot print. I can't be wrong. The other one should be a human. I'm not too sure." Human? I thought I would see a pair of huge claws. Gavin Rad shrugged. His huge pauldrons made his shrug very obvious. Look here. This is a shoe print. She pointed at a depression in the forest. A clear, heavy footprint had formed a depression in the grass and mud. This is a common shoe for human nobles. It's very tight and uncomfortable. Chapter 492. Gavin Rad looked at his steel boots, and then at the footprint, which was not much smaller but much shallower, and found that it was indeed the case. He whistled and said, "Well, there's good news. It seems that the big black lizard once greeted our Sir Marcus with the etiquette of a noble. Or rather, did he try to learn the etiquette of a noble from our duke?" This slightly mischievous joke made everyone laugh, and they felt much more relaxed. There's also the draconic magic. Marion carefully examined the terrifying burn marks around the place where Duque had sat. There were no spreading flames, only the purest control over flames. Deathwing's control over the power of destruction could be said to be at the peak. This discovery caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Their hearts turned cold. What does he want Lord Marcus to do? Ronan mumbled. Marion rubbed the place where Duque had sat and pointed at a mark. There's clearly a line of words here, written with magic. However, that line of words was erased by the power of flames. Sasha's pupils suddenly constricted. Perhaps it was this line of words left by Duque that angered Deathwing a little, so he used draconic magic to demonstrate his might. However, Sasha immediately discovered more important clues. It was a white mark that looked like it had been made by a fingernail. She did not know how Duque had done it, but when she focused on the white mark, it had been magnified by at least 3 times, and there were 2 lines of words clearly written on it. I'm safe. Deathwing wants me to save Alexstrasza. At least we're in agreement on this. I need your power, but please keep your distance from me for at least an hour. Deathwing is likely to be near me. This was supposed to be the end, but Sasha suddenly discovered that there was another line of words carved with the power of wind, even shallower and smaller. Apart from her, it was impossible for anyone who had not been strengthened by the storm altar to see it. The first line was, "You asked Ronan to privately inform his mentor that the key to breaking out of this predicament lies with that person." After seeing the second line, Sasha was even more shocked. Sasha took a deep breath and finally controlled her emotions. "Everyone look at this. I'm not sure if your eyes can see it." After Ronan provided a magnifying glass, everyone finally saw Duque's message. "What should we do?" "Of course follow them." Back to Duque's side, Duque was having a headache. Only those who had interacted with him knew that Deathwing was a brilliant, yet clumsy director. Brilliant referred to his schemes when he was in his right mind. Without the system, Duque would have been brainwashed by the amulet he had given him. What made Duque tremble the most was that he had to continue acting. Otherwise, if Deathwing flipped the table, Duque definitely wouldn't be able to handle it. Clumsy referred to the choices he made when his mental illness was acting up. Deathwing actually thought that he walked too slowly and found a vehicle for him. The first thing he saw was a huge oval object that looked like a rugby ball. The entire ball was made of all kinds of terrible leather. Duque really didn't dare to compliment the craftsmanship. He couldn't guarantee that it would leak at any time. Next was the steam engine at the tail of the oval that was emitting smoke. It was obviously a propeller. That's right. What appeared in front of Duque was an inferior version of the Zeppelin airship, the Goblin death-seeking airship. Azeroth was a magical world. There were mainstream swords and magic, as well as non-mainstream mechanical civilizations. At this point in time, a crude steam engine was already considered a high-end technology. Even though the airship had a clear tribal emblem on it, Duque knew that this was a gift from Deathwing. Goblins, their moral integrity was equivalent to money. As long as they could afford it or the price they wanted, they would definitely sell their moral integrity for money. Therefore, these goblins who worked for the tribe on the surface were actually the underlings of Deathwing's underlings. Just as Best Actor Du was pretending to hide, a familiar voice sounded in his head. "Don't be afraid. They're loyal to me. The Goblin airship will save you a lot of time. You and I both want the Red Dragon Queen to rescue us as soon as possible, don't we? Why doesn't His Majesty Deathwing send me there directly? Why don't you just tell me the spatial coordinates?" Duque asked. "I'm trying to avoid unnecessary fighting. Also, there's a very strong mysterious force under Grim Battle that prevents all spatial teleportation." Duque muttered. "You make it sound like the 2 red dragons you slaughtered last night were just bison on the hillside." "Well, I'd rather use all my magic to use flash than take the Goblin airship," Duque said firmly. "Go on, the Goblin airship is very safe." Duque suddenly realized that Deathwing had used a command format when he said this. In the system prompt, it clearly said, "Deathwing is using a coercive mental command to force you to obey." Duque's head hurt. If he wanted to continue his path as a movie king, then he had to obey. Otherwise he'd be exposed. The curve of Duque's face softened a little, and his eyes fell into a temporary emptiness. His voice was close to a whisper. "Well, taking the airship is indeed much faster." In the end, Duque still boarded the pirate ship. Yes, his left hand held the casting tool, Light Feather, which was specially used by mages to jump off buildings. Then, he silently recited the incantation for Ice Barrier again and again in his heart. Although the goblins were unreliable, Duque was still a little glad. Looking at the rugged mountain ridges that had long turned into the forest below him, Duque realized that if he wanted to avoid the west side of the stronghold, where the 100,000 tribes camped, it would probably take him a whole week instead of 2 days. Taking shortcuts was not always a good thing. For example, the behavior of the Goblin airship made Duque's nerves unable to relax for even a moment. During the flight, there were all kinds of accidents. Often, after the previous air maintenance, they had to deal with the emergency that had just appeared. Bang! A loud noise made Duque jump up in fright. This time, it was the main steam tank that was leaking. This airship was powered by both water and oil. If one part was working normally, then the other part must be paralyzed. Every moment was no exception. Of course, He didn't know if there was a problem with the similarity in this world, or if he hit the 21% mark. Only then did Duque realize that the name of this airship was actually Rolls-Royce Screw. Chapter 493. There was no navigator, no anemometer. Everything was judged by sight. And these two damned goblins had the guts to drive the airship into the clouds without hesitation. There were a few times when Duque saw cliffs suddenly appear on the side of the airship, but it was Duque who rushed up to steer the airship to prevent it from being destroyed and killed. At that moment, the two stupid goblins were still trying to fix the hole in the balloon. Duque, who could not take it anymore, had already prepared for the worst. He directly gave the control of activating the ice barrier to the system elf, because he could not guarantee that he would have the concentration and reflexes to open the ice barrier at the critical moment to save his life. If the secret of his resurrection was discovered by Deathwing, then he would be in deep trouble. As expected, the two goblins were busy repairing the structure. These two fellows with boundless hearts even dozed off from time to time, completely ignoring the dangers that were just inches away from them, such as a sudden air leak, a sudden descent from a high altitude, or the possibility of a mountain being installed and so on. Just like that, Duque endured an entire day, and then a sleepless night. For the whole day, Duque almost did not eat or drink anything, because he would vomit if he drank, and he would vomit even more if he ate. Duque almost suspected that Deathwing deliberately made him suffer, so that his will would be weakened, and the hypnosis would be completed as soon as possible. But the next morning, Duque changed his mind. The first light of dawn appeared, and the clouds around them gradually disappeared. So much so that Duque felt that the airship had finally sailed from the sea into the sky. There was no thick fog, and everything within 10 kilometers was clearly visible. The large forest under his feet turned into a rugged, uninhabited wilderness, and he could see that the terrain in front of him was gradually rising, all the way to the cliffs of grim battle. Along the way, there were indeed a few small forests along the way, but the overall coverage was quite sparse. People walking in the wilderness would be very conspicuous, and the orc dragon riders could easily see their traces from a few kilometers away. None of the orc dragon riders were interested in the airship that Duque was in. The most recent time, a red dragon even flew less than 500 meters away, and the orc dragon riders on it did not even look at the airship. Even when he flew past, the airship's steam engine made a loud explosion. It seemed like the orcs were used to the gnomes working for the horde for money, or it could be said that they completely looked down on these little green dwarves, who were loyal to the tribe for the sake of the yellow metal. It was a good move for Orgrim to bribe the goblins with the gold he obtained from conquering the human capital. The beastmen didn't want it, but the goblins wanted it. The two sides almost hit it off. Duque narrowed his eyes. He was thinking about how his team of 4 was going to pass this place. After a day and a night of flying, grim battle was quite close to them. Sasha and the others who were following carefully on their griffins were also getting closer. At this moment, a major event that did not belong to the original history happened. In the Dalajan city, the kings of the 6 human kingdoms, plus Prince Kudran, Wildhammer and Kale, that's a total of 8 leaders were gathered together. Something big must have happened for so many big shots to gather together. Prince Drake Proudmoore, the next king of the maritime kingdom Kurtiras, died in battle. Dalajan Kirantor council member Gastala Malo died in battle. Silvermoon council member Balamine Kez died in battle. Former leader of the Bloodsail Pirates and current deputy commander of the Stormwind Fleet, Duke Fairville died in battle. Along with the deaths of these 4 countries, there were also shocking losses. The culprits were the ancient red dragons, led by Tyrannis Tyrannistus. Every place where 3 or more kings sat could be called a throne room. Now in the throne room, King Dalen Proudmoore's roar resounded. Calm down? Lothar, you're asking me to calm down. Now the one whose son died is not you but me. You're asking me to believe in Duque. Alright, I've waited for him for 2 weeks. Every day, every night, my men and I had to brave the threat of those damned lizards and patrol the sea. Now it's all over. This is the result of waiting. Dalen threw out a piece of metal that was mainly gold, and had been completely deformed by the flames. This thing made a clanging sound as it hit the floor tiles of the hall. The sound of it bouncing and rolling on the floor pounded everyone's heart. Almost no one could recognize that it was a scimitar. Dalen cried. The next king of Kurtiris has been sacrificed. He was burned to ashes by a ball of fire right in front of me. This is all Drake has left. Lothar was speechless. If not for the fact that Stormwind had also lost a duke, who knew how crazy King Dalen would have been. Now, this hero of the sea who fought on the battlefield almost every day since the start of the war, and gave his all for the alliance, was sitting on the floor tiles in front of the throne, bawling his eyes out. Yes, at this moment, there was no king, no admiral galloping on the blue waves of the sea, only a father who had lost his son. As the attack of the red dragons became fiercer, the leaders of the alliance who originally wanted to defend the red dragon army did not dare to say a word. After all, the alliance with the red dragon army was a thing of the past. The attack of the ancient red dragon was a real threat now. Every king had a bad look on their faces. King Tyrrhenas asked in a deep voice, "Is there still no news from our deputy commander?" Silence was the only reply. Croesus, who stood beside Antonidas, wanted to say something, but in the end he remained silent. He had already received the news that Ronan had sent him. Croesus tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. His most admired queen was still locked up in prison, but the wings of death intervened. That was the wings of death, the one that caused the entire dragon race to fall into civil strife and the verge of collapse. Perhaps if the most powerful magicians of the human race were gathered together, they would be able to fight against it, but only to the point of fighting. Croesus did not think that humans had the ability to kill Nethario. Croesus did not think that humans and elves could do what no dragon had done in the past 10,000 years. After all, that was no longer the realm of mortals. So Croesus chose to remain silent. His mind was filled with the things that happened these days. The news from Duke Ronan made him understand that Duke had reached the pinnacle of mortals. Now it was up to him to find help against the wings of death. But these days he had hit a wall for the second time. When Croesus came back to his senses, the discussion of the kings in the hall seemed to have come to a conclusion. Then it's decided. We will send a large assault team to save the Red Dragon Queen. Or kill her, Tyrrhenas announced. Chapter 494. The roars in the throne room were still echoing in his ears. I object. Marcus is already on his way to save Alexstrasza. We should always trust our deputy commander, King Lang retorted angrily like an injured lion. I've always trusted him. I gave him 2 whole weeks. But when my son died in battle, he still hadn't gotten rid of those damned red lizards. Dalen retorted mercilessly. The eyes of the Lion of the Sea, who had just lost his crown prince, were horribly bloodshot. Lang was speechless. If it were him, he would also go crazy if anything happened to William. Dalen continued to roar, and the scorching sound waves echoed in the hall. Look at what he's done in the past 14 days. Hundreds and thousands of soldiers at the front line die in the flames every day. But he spent 14 days on a path that could have been reached by griffins or teleportation portals. There's no progress report, no regular communication, and we don't even know if he's alive or not. How do you expect me and the kings in the throne room to continue trusting him? But our deputy commander who's cursed with death is sacrificing the alliance's trust in him, King Xian said, hitting the nail on the head. This made Lang's heart skip a beat. Since the start of the war, which country hasn't sacrificed anything? War is bound to be accompanied by sacrifices. Antonidas tried to persuade Lang to give up on Duque. Lang's body trembled. To him and Stormwind, he and Lothar were destined to grow old, and they would have to hand over the country to William, Bolvar, and Duque in the future. And Duque was definitely Stormwind's hope of reviving the country. Be it emotionally or rationally, he did not want to believe that Duque would fail and fall. Anduin could not stand it anymore. At least wait for the last communication. He promised to send a magical message every 3 days. Tyrrhenas replied in a businesslike manner. Sure, but I hope that you will put the alliance first and allow us to form a large assault force. If there's no news of the deputy commander, Anduin Lothar gritted his teeth. I agree. Things were not over yet. Next up, since Deputy Commander-in-Chief Duke Marcus is unable to carry out his duties, I propose that the Alliance appoint another Deputy Commander-in-Chief, coordinating the actions of the various nations. Jean suddenly raised his hand and said. Lang and Anduin's pupils constricted. What the hell was Gilnis doing? Or could it be that the old bastard Xeon had already formed some sort of secret alliance with Tyrrhenus? To be honest, without Duque around, there was indeed a problem with the coordination of the alliance. As Anduin's assistant, Tyrrhen temporarily took over Duque's work, but the results were not ideal. Tyrrhen had good leadership skills, but he was unable to handle logistics, troop mobilization, and warfare all by himself like Duque. It had been a year since the alliance had been established. This was no longer the situation where all the kingdoms refused to submit to each other and needed to find a neutral party to take the blame. In the absence of Duque, Tyrrhen's reputation was not enough to convince the masses. That was the most fatal problem. He had never led an army on his own, and he did not have extraordinary bravery or a suitable title. It could be said that Tyrrhen was treated rather negatively by the kings of the kingdoms when he carried out his work. Moreover, in actual combat, there were often situations where the troops had to be split up. One deputy commander was indeed not enough. In the end, High Lord Alexandros Mograine from Rotterdam was elected as the second deputy commander with a high number of votes. In theory, he was ranked below Duque, but every king knew that once it was confirmed that Duque was dead, Mograine would be the actual deputy commander. When they returned to the state guest house, Lang flew into a rage, which was rare for him. Anduin, that bastard Tyrrhenus is trying to make you a mere figurehead. Lothar was silent for a long time. If it's for the sake of the Alliance's victory, I can accept it. I'm afraid that the old bastard is not just doing it for the sake of the Alliance's victory. Lang swept everything on the table to the ground. This was no longer a conspiracy, it was an overt plot. Yes, everyone realized that Rotterdam had changed. In the beginning, everyone from Rotterdam thought that they were the saviors of the world, and that they would save the ignorant people from all the kingdoms and join this seemingly distant war. However, when the horde burned down the Silverpine forest and threatened the holy capital, Stratholm, and even fought their way to Rotterdam, everything changed when the Rotterdam people's dignity was mercilessly trampled on. It was no longer the atmosphere of no matter what happens at the border, we will still sing and dance in peace. Instead, the whole country showed a hysterical and unreasonable stubbornness. Revenge. Not only did he want a bloody revenge, moreover, they had to win the battle beautifully. It was a great victory that required the worship of 6 human kingdoms, 2 dwarf kingdoms, and 1 elf kingdom, as well as all of the 9 kingdoms. Tyrrhenus was so proud of his team of thieves, but they had failed. Finally, Tyrrhenus had waited for this opportunity. The worst thing was that as the leader of the alliance, Rotterdam had set a very bad precedent. Just as Lang was throwing a tantrum, the guard sent a message saying that Duque's maid was asking to see him. Duque's maid? Yes, we've all seen her. Her name is Vanessa Van Cleef. Van Cleef. Lang, of course, remembered this surname. It was one of the 2 heroes who helped the people of Stormwind obtain a base of operations behind enemy lines. Let her in. Vanessa entered and said something that made Lang furious. Your Majesty, please save my master's disciple, Miss Alicia Baroff. The nobles of Rotterdam want to force her into marriage. What? Lang and Anduin lost their voices at the same time. Almost everyone in the alliance knew about the relationship between Duque and Alicia. Alicia, who had become Duque's right-hand man, appeared on many occasions as Duque's spokesperson. For example, she represented Duque at Kuel Salas's diplomatic banquets. No one in Stormwind would have thought that Rotterdam would make a move on Alicia after losing contact with Duque. From Vanessa's angry narration, Lang and Anduin understood the whole story. In the end, it was just one sentence. Tyrrhenus had his eyes on the land of Alterac. Rotterdam was hurt. The nobles of Rotterdam not only desired glory and blood for revenge, they also desired real benefits. The bloodline of King Eden had been severed. Eden himself had betrayed the alliance and humanity, and would eventually be nailed to the pillar of shame. The last obstacle to controlling Alterac was Duke Barov. There was news that the Duke's 2 sons had joined the Horde, but this news was not confirmed. Chapter 495. But now, all of Alterac's soldiers were fighting for the Alliance in order to wash away this humiliation. At this time, a rubbish baron from a small family that was not ranked in Rotterdam proposed to the Barov family, hoping to marry Alicia. I am a descendant of the noble Arthi, the Pavan family of East Tirisfal. Our Baron B.S. Pavan sincerely proposed to Alicia for 1,000 gold coins. If the Barov family desires the protection of Rotterdam, then a marriage alliance with our family is your best and only choice. Vanessa angrily mimicked the tone of the messenger. The pitifully small betrothal gift and the arrogant words made it seem as if he, a mere baron, was condescending to marry Alicia. Ryan was already infuriated by Vanessa's retelling of the story. How dare the people of Rotterdam do this? Andoin roared, his long hair fluttering due to his intense movements like a lion's mane. Alicia is not only Duque's woman, she is also my earl. A rubbish viscount dares to do this. Lang was the one who agreed to confer the title on Alicia. Although it was a frontline conferment, there was an official conferment process, and it was announced to all the countries in the alliance. No wonder Lang slammed the table on the spot. That bastard dares. Miss Alicia clearly objected, but Duke Barov was silent for a long time, and did not object or accept, only saying that he would consider it. That's right, Alicia did not belong to Alterac in theory, but as long as the blood of the Barov family flowed in her body, she could not completely escape the shackles of the Barov family. The people of Rotterdam knew this, and found a loophole to propose to Duke Barov directly, instead of going through the Stormwind. The flames of anger ignited in the hearts of the king and the minister, and along with the strong beating of their hearts, it poured into the main arteries and into every corner of their bodies. It was rare for the guards to realize that their 2 bosses were angry. It was the kind of thunderous rage that was ignited. If this is a test by Tyrannus, Lang raised his fist. Then let's go tell him our answer together. Andoin's fist collided with Lang's. At this moment a guard suddenly rushed in. Your Majesty, this is an emergency. Near South Shore, General Windsor led his private legion to attack the camp of the Rotterdam people. What? Lang was shocked. And Bolvar and Tom? Asked Anduin. Duke Verdragon is at the wall of Saladin. General Seamus went to inspect the Jasper mine. Lang and his childhood friend looked at each other, and immediately understood that they had to go together to suppress the situation. In fact, when Vanessa came to the Dalajan to meet King Lang, Duque's men were in an uproar. Because it was a secret operation, Duque did not take most of his men with him. After hearing the news, Makarov and Duke's Cavalier Captain Kasser immediately led their men to seek justice. What was the concept of 100 knights? A weaker duke could not even afford to keep 100 knights. One could imagine how shocking it was when 100 fully armed Highland knights went to the camp of the Rotterdam nobles. Because of the recent attack by the Red Dragon, the camps of the various countries were almost all set up together. This was to gather a limited number of ballistae, archers, and mages to better deal with the Wyvern. Also because it was located at the rear, the camps of the various countries were separated by the simplest wooden fences. In fact, before the knights reached the camp of the Rotterdam nobles, the people of Rotterdam had already discovered them. After all, they were too big a target. The soldiers guarding the camp looked over in confusion, then froze for a moment, and their faces darkened. The soldiers of Rotterdam, who were doing their own things in the camp, were also stunned. Go back, you Stormwind people, this is not your turf. The guard yelled angrily. Before he could finish his words, Cass had already rushed forward and immediately shouted, Get the Pavan out first! Without needing to say anything, the knights next to him threw a few grappling hooks over. There was no need for the people of Rotterdam to open the gate. A magnificent group of 6 knights separated to the left and right, and the ropes tied to the saddles pulled the grappling hooks. With a loud bang, the wooden gate of the Rotterdam nobles' camp was blown away. The The collapsing gate smashed onto the back of the guard who had shouted, and the immense force caused the guard who weighed close to 100 kilograms to fall to the ground like a tortoise. When Casa and the rest of the 90 knights rushed into the camp, the soldiers of Rotterdam only then realized that the Southerners had rebelled. How dare they rush into Rotterdam's camp? One by one, they put down what they were doing and surrounded the knights in anger. But who was Casa? He was an elite Highland knight who had been trained in Arthi. If not for Salas, who could not support so many knights, would he have come to serve Duque? In the world of magic, knights were rather fragile, but to these ordinary soldiers, they were all existences at the level of a father. With a sudden thrust of his lance, he stabbed a soldier of Rotterdam who tried to stop him, causing him to vomit blood. Why did he vomit blood and not stab him to death? Because Casa did not completely lose his mind. He and his men were all using blunt wooden lances that were used for practice. However, the huge impact hit the guy's iron armor, causing him to vomit blood and fly backward. He fell to the ground and could not get up for a long time. The people of Rotterdam were stunned. Without stopping at all, the 100 cavalrymen were like one person, charging straight towards the tent with the banner of the Paven family. A knight pulled out his blunt sword and slashed the shoulder of a Rotterdam man who tried to stop him. There was also a knight holding a shield and slamming it with it. Of course, Casa was the best at fighting. When he reached the place, he immediately grabbed the person in question. He grabbed the bastard who dreamed of being a baron and the daughter of a duke, and greeted him with punches. Originally, Casa was tall and strong. With his iron gauntlets on his fists, he felt that the guy was going further and further down the road of ugliness with every punch. The knights were really angry. They picked up the things beside them and smashed them on the heads of the Paven family people. How many soldiers could there be in a small family with only one baron and 2 viscounts? Except for the 2 knights and more than 20 professional spearmen, they were all farmers. After Casa knocked the baron named Bust to the ground, he continued to kick him. Go to hell. Bastard, you want to marry our countess for 1,000 gold coins. A dog wants to eat dragon meat? You dare to snatch our duke's woman? Since you've gone crazy thinking about women, I'll tell you what the cruel reality is. Chapter 496. The people of Rotterdam were dumbfounded. They had seen fierce ones, but never this fierce. After all, apart from mages, paladins, and other mystical beings who could use extraordinary powers, the most powerful force in a country was the knights. The average knight trained for 8 to 10 years before finishing his apprenticeship. Their combat power was not to be underestimated. Normally, a fully armed knight on a horse could take care of 10 ordinary soldiers and 100 peasant soldiers. 100 knights went up and easily beat the people of the Paven family into dead dogs. In fact, there were only 40 people who attacked directly. The rest were divided into teams of 15, guarding the 4 sides. Any Rotterdam people who dared to come near would be beaten up. They would not stop until the other party was beaten to the ground. If this was Turinas's army camp, or the army camp of a lord like Mograine, it would be impossible for him to survive. Perhaps the Rotterdam people had already fought back. Unfortunately, this was a noble barracks. They came from different families, and they were competitors. After discovering that the Stormwind people were only targeting the Paven family, a group of nobles also joined in the fun and reported to their superiors. Duke Charmos was the trusted aide of King Turinas, and he knew about this test. Almost as soon as he received the news, his stomach hurt. In fact, after completing the defense of Rotterdam, when Turinas realized that Rotterdam had a chance to take over Alterac, they suddenly realized that they had acted a little too late. This was no longer a simple matter between Rotterdam and Alterac. It involved Stormwind. Now that the threat of the Horde had not been eliminated, Rotterdam could not fall out with Stormwind, one of the main forces of the alliance. Therefore, this was just a test. Whether it succeeded or failed, Rotterdam would not do anything further to avoid provoking the other kingdoms. It would be good if the Barra family was obedient. If the Barra family was not willing, then there would be plenty of time to deal with them after the war. However, by then, Rotterdam's appearance might be more ugly. Charmos did not expect the reaction from Stormwind to be so intense. He immediately rushed to the nearby camp to find Mograine. The people of Stormwind came to the camp of the 5th Legion of Rotterdam to cause trouble. There were nearly 100 knights. The gendarmerie could not handle it. Mograine had just received a magic message. He had been appointed as the Alliance's vice commander. Who would have known that someone would cause trouble right after the promotion order was issued? If this wasn't a slap in the face, what was? Originally, he was the supreme commander of this place. Now that something had happened, he naturally could not shirk the responsibility. Mograine was a pure soldier. Without another word, he ran out of the tent and called for his 3,000 elite soldiers. They rushed to the scene of the incident aggressively. Not long after he left the camp, he realized that something was wrong. The moment he stepped out of the camp, a bugle horn sounded from another camp not far away. When he was halfway there, he discovered that the Stormwind army had already rushed out of the camp like a tide. The corners of Mograine's eyes twitched as he stared at Charmos beside him. He cursed in his heart. "Charmos, you bastard, you tricked me?" It had been proven time and time again that the nobles' private armies were rarely capable of fighting. The number of ranked private armies in the entire alliance could be counted on one hand. The person standing in front of him was one of them. It was Duke Duque of Stormwind's private army. Before Kuel Salas had joined the alliance, Stormwind had given half of the Griffin Legion to Duque. Not only was this private army overstaffed, they had fought from the Elven Forest all the way to Kuel Salas. They had fought dozens of battles, large and small. They could be said to be elites who had fought from the south to the north. Their bravery was no less than Noxus's 1st Legion of Stormwind. Mograine's teeth hurt the moment he saw this army blocking his way. "General Windsor, what are you doing?" Windsor was a righteous man, but Makarov beside him was not. As Duque's mouthpiece and the first confidant to follow Duque, he was not only loyal, but had also learned many of Duque's evil tricks. Makarov rode out and shouted, "I'm sorry, General Mograine. Our Stormwind Kingdom's Countess Alicia Barov was humiliated by your kingdom's Baron B.S. Paven. Baron Paven attempted to marry Countess Barov with a betrothal gift of 1,000 gold coins. Duke Marcus's knight captain, Cassar Ulysses, could not tolerate such humiliation and went to duel with Baron Paven. This time, Charmos was also anxious. If Mograine's elites arrived quickly and captured Duque's knights, even if King Lang came later to ask for them, at least King Terina's would not lose face. But now, the other side seemed to have predicted it, and did not hesitate to send a large force to stop Mograine. Then, Charmos could not imagine how angry King Terina's would be when he returned. Charmos did not care about his demeanor and directly cursed. "Duel? Bullshit. We received reports that your knights beat up our nobles. This is a great humiliation to the glory of the Kingdom of Lordaeron." At this time Windsor stepped forward. "We belong to the same alliance now. Don't let other countries see us as a joke. Why don't we retreat first, then each take 100 people in to see the situation, and then discuss?" Mograine stared at Charmos. "Okay." The army retreated, and when Mograine brought his men into the camp, he was instantly stunned. The surroundings were a mess. In order to avoid being affected, more than 4,000 noble private soldiers were like rabbits being chased into a corner, almost squeezing against the camp wall and shivering. The camp gate was demolished. The demolition method was simple and violent, which could be seen from the fact that the camp gate was dragged more than 30 meters away. Then everything between the camp gate and the Paven family's camp was flattened. From tents to ordnance, from campfires to camp beds. Mograine's eyelids twitched as he walked. It was one thing for the Stormwind wolves to be troublesome, but their combat strength was also very strong. Finally, Mograine saw Baron Paven, who was beaten to the point of death, and did not look like a human. If it were not for the fact that the guy was covered in mud, and could still vaguely recognize the badge and robe, Mograine would never be sure that this guy was always as arrogant as a swan. Charmos was angry. "Duel? Is this still a holy duel? You call yourselves knights, and you even threw away the glory of the knights. This is blasphemy. This is the greatest humiliation to the great kingdom of Lordaeron. I want to report this to the leader of the Menethil Alliance. I want Stormwind to publicly apologize." His sharp voice echoed in the silent camp. Alusia, who was following closely behind Windsor, was stunned. At this time, Makarov came out, leisurely took a drag on his cigarette, and then said slowly, "I think Knight Ulysses just threw his gloves to Baron Pavan." With that, Makarov raised an iron glove that weighed a full 2 pounds. Chapter 497. You call this a fucking glove? Even a lighter rapier is not as heavy as this thing. A glove is a glove, and a gauntlet is still a gauntlet. Look at you. It's actually a one-piece, with alloy plates attached to the places where the fingers can move. It stands to reason that this is definitely a gauntlet, but because it contains fabric, it's not impossible to call it a glove. Anyway, seeing Cassar's glove, Duke Charmos almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He trembled and scolded angrily. "You're quibbling. First, a glove is not like this. Second, how do you explain Baron Pavan's face full of scars? Cassar has really been led astray by Duque. As the captain of Duque's knights, from the moment he took the oath, his future was tied to Duque's. He strictly remembered Duque's instructions before he left, and activated his acting mode that barely reached the Oscar level. First, I swear in the name of my master Duke Marcus, that this is definitely a glove. Second, I just threw the glove on Baron Pavan's face. Here, just like this. In front of Duke Charmos, in front of Mograine, the newly promoted deputy commander of the Alliance, and in front of Alicia, the biggest victim of the incident. The bastard Cassar once again threw the gauntlet that he had taken off a long time ago onto the face of the Baron, who had already fainted. Pa! There was a loud sound, and the scene was painful. What was the difference between this and being hit in the face with half a brick? Baron B.S. Pavan walked further and further down the road of unrecognizable disfigurement. "Bastard!" Duke Charmos scolded. "You!" Mograine could not continue even half a word. "Ah!" Alicia covered her mouth in surprise, looking at the legendary tragic object that could become her man. Cassar, who was obviously a handsome man, continued to play dumb. "But Baron Pavan ignored my request for a duel. Is he still a man? As a noble? I am a baron, and he is a baron. How could he refuse me so cowardly? How dare such a despicable, cowardly, good-for-nothing man call himself a noble of Rotterdam?" After saying that, Cassar picked up the gauntlet that weighed 2 kilograms and threw it at the unconscious beast Pavan in front of Charmos and Mograine. "That's why he challenged Baron Pavan to a duel again and again." Pooh! The people of Stormwind were not the only ones who burst into laughter. Even the people of the Rotterdam Kingdom could not help but burst out laughing. "Aren't you a little too fake? Asking for a duel again and again? Are you sure you're not venting your anger?" The originally smart, capable, and handsome knight captain now wore a retarded expression as he recited the lines left by Duque, and beat up the bastard Baron in front of everyone. There was no need to mention how much the Tempest man had vented his anger. Still covering her mouth, Alicia's eyes were already blurred by tears. She knew that everything was left behind by Duque. Without Duque's instructions, Cassar, who had always been strict with the spirit of chivalry, would never do such a thing. Makarov would never bring people out to cause trouble. There was no way Windsor would mobilize his 10,000 private soldiers to confront Mograine, the most famous general in the Alliance. Even if Duque was temporarily absent, Duque still took care of her and the Bearer family behind her. Last year, when Duque came to the Bearer family for food, he promised that if the Bearer family was in trouble, he would protect them. Today, the attitude of Stormwind was unknown, but it was clear that Duque was fulfilling his promise. There were many men who were willing to make promises, but there were very few who were willing to take huge risks and still fulfill their promises. If the condition of going against the most powerful human kingdom in the world was added to the condition, it would be even less than 1 in a million. But Duque did it. Originally, Alicia was already in despair. King Eden courted death and destroyed the entire kingdom. Without a kingdom, all the nobles were like castles on the beach. They looked magnificent, but when the waves came, they would collapse. Two disappointing younger brothers first betrayed the alliance, and then disappeared. Who knew how the Bear family would be dealt with after the war? Think about it. Even General Haas, who did not participate in the rebellion, led his soldiers to become cannon fodder. The once incomparably noble Bear family was now just an empty shell, mercilessly squeezed out of money and resources. In the past, those who dared to propose were either dukes, or at least the first in line to the Grand Duke's throne. Now, a Lordaeron baron dared to come and defecate with his nose in the air, as if marrying him was beneath him. Her best friend in Lordaeron secretly wrote a letter to her, asking her to accept this humiliating marriage. Give up. You are no longer that high and mighty Grand Duke's daughter. Alterac has not yet fallen, but it's not far from it. A fallen king will not have a good ending, and a fallen noble will not have a good ending either. In history, many men who participated in the rebellion were hanged, and many daughters who were implicated became the victor's playthings, dying with hatred. To be honest, on the day of Alterac's incident, Elugia had a premonition that this would happen. However, at that time, Duque was there to support her heart, opening his broad chest to become her, and even the entire Bear family's safe harbor. Even if her parents did not think that Duque would protect them until the end, she was still willing to believe in Duque's promise. The day Duque was exposed to the curse of death in Lordaeron was the fuse that nearly caused Elugia's heart to collapse. From that day onwards, Elugia had truly given up hope. However, at this moment, she was shocked to find that her daily prayers seemed to have been answered by the gods. Yes, Duque was still magical. He was still the creator of miracles. Even if he was not here for the time being, he was still firmly in control of the situation. If that was the case, what was there to worry about? I was so stupid. I should have believed in him until the very end. Even if everyone thought that Duque would die from the curse, I should not have given up this hope. Elugia suddenly raised her head. Everyone could see her teary eyes, and everyone could see the renewed determination in her eyes. She smiled brightly. Then Casa smiled, Makarov smiled, and even the righteous Reginald Windsor smiled. Not only them, but everyone in Stormwind smiled knowingly. Yes, Duque might really die. Duque's will would be passed on, even if there were only them left on this path. But if anyone wants to bully our people, have they asked for our permission? Have they asked if our fists are fierce? Have they asked if our swords are sharp? If anyone is shameless, we will slap their face. If anyone dares to stretch out their claws, we will cut off their claws. Duque, you are with us. We are with you. Chapter 498. Originally, when Tyrrhenas arrived, he wanted to drag out Baron Pavan, who had been beaten beyond recognition, and ask for an explanation from Lang. To be honest, it was indeed an insult to marry a duke's daughter with a dowry of 1,000 gold coins, but the great Rotterdam kingdom could not take it lying down. Tyrrhenas did not ask for the Stormwind to hand over the culprit. He was just trying to put some pressure on Stormwind, at least so that Stormwind would not interfere when Rotterdam kingdom annexed Alterac in the future. At this time, everyone could guess what happened, including Lothar. All the Storm Royal Knights at the scene threw their gauntlets at Baron Pavan with all their might. Baron Pavan, I want to duel with you. Everyone shouted loudly, scaring the old Tyrrhenas half to death. Baron Pavan, who had been pulled out to be used as a spear, was knocked unconscious again on the spot. Well, it was a miracle that he did not die after being smashed by these violent, muscular men. Tyrrhenas finally realized the Storm Royal Knight's unyielding attitude. Even Lothar was strongly against it, so there was no room for discussion. If the commander of the alliance resigned because of such a ridiculous matter, then Rotterdam would be the real sinner. Baron was almost the smallest noble. Below them was the knight, who was more symbolic than substantive. Knights were considered quasi-nobles, higher than commoners but lower than nobles. So for this day, Duque made almost all the nobles nobles. Originally, he had pushed this guy out to test the waters. In the end, of course, this matter was left unsettled. However, in the upcoming war, there would definitely be some friction between Rotterdam and Storm Royal. In fact, all the other kingdoms had begun to be wary of Rotterdam. When the news was sent to Duque through magic, Duque was at the edge of the cliff of grim battle and stopped at the entrance of the cave. It was not because the cave could not lead to the Red Dragon Queen, but because the power of the wind told him that there were more than 3 young red dragons resting in the middle of the road. Unless the dragons were in hibernation, ordinary humans would not be able to hide from their senses. Stealth was useless. Since he couldn't enter, he could only stay where he was. When the message arrived, the system notified Duque almost immediately. Warning! Warning! Magic communication encryption level lowered. Suspect communication is being eavesdropped. Duque's pupils suddenly shrank. His worst fears had come true. A magic transmission leak. Needless to say, it must be the doing of the Black Dragon King hiding in the dark. At the end of the day, magic communication was still a type of magic. In this world, the true ancestors of magic were the dragons. The Blue Dragon King Maligos was responsible for guarding the secrets of magic, but that was only for outsiders. In fact, all true dragons were good at magic. Needless to say, Nesario, who was originally one of the 5 dragon aspects. This was the most important reason why Duque refused to communicate with them at all times. Wings of Death didn't isolate Duque's external communications. He was only eavesdropping. Duque could still receive the complete message. However, this message still made Duque tremble. Lordaeron appointed Mograine as the deputy commander of the alliance and sought Alterac. They tried to send a noble to marry Miss Barov with a dowry of 1,000 gold coins, but they have been stopped by us and Commander Lothar. Duque's body suddenly trembled a little. Was it excitement, anger, or sadness? His heart thumping violently. Duque wanted to take a deep breath so that Nesario wouldn't notice his intense emotions, but he couldn't suppress it. Lordaeron, like in history, had made a move on Alterac. Perhaps because the tribes in this life were more aggressive, Lordaeron suffered more losses than in history. So under the impulse of rapid expansion, Tyrrhena's made a move earlier than in history. In history, the biggest symbol of the change from Lordaeron alliance to alliance was the destruction of Lordaeron. When Arthas came to the center and directly killed his father and destroyed Lordaeron, the surrounding countries had the chance to save the other cities of Lordaeron, but they all chose to watch from the sidelines, which gave Arthas the opportunity to destroy them one by one. Why? Could it be that the kings of Cuel Salis, Gilnis, Dalagen, and Stormguard were all blind? No, that's not it. That was because all the surrounding countries were king screwed over by Tyrrhena's. In the original history, after winning the second battle of the Dark Portal, the Alliance captured more than 100,000 orcs. The orcs were clearly invaders, slaughtering countless humans and burning countless cities. After winning the war, Tyrrhena's actually made a seemingly brainless suggestion. A real knight will not slaughter captives, so we can just imprison the orcs. Was Tyrrhena's really brainless? No. On the contrary, he was extremely shrewd. Shrewd to the point of being ruthless. On one hand, the mainstream values of chivalry at that time did not allow for this. On the other hand, Tyrrhena's dream of Lordaeron, becoming the new capital of the human empire, through the Battle of the Dark Portal was shattered. No country was willing to follow Lordaeron, since everyone had to bear the losses and destruction brought about by the war. If I am not living well, then don't even think about living well. Apart from the Stormwind Kingdom, which had 1,000 things to do, almost every human kingdom was forced to imprison orcs. The famous Durnhold Castle, Lordaeron Mill Shelter, and Hammerfall Town were all orc prisons that Lordaeron, as the leader of the alliance, forced the various countries to build. The economies of the various countries were already on the brink of collapse because of the war, and they were forced to carry this huge burden by Tyrrhena's, who pretended to be a saint. It would be strange if they were angry. The truth was, after hearing that Lordaeron had fallen, the leaders of the various countries clapped their hands in joy. In the end, they all ignored the fact that the Scourge army was made up of immortals, and were overwhelmed by the immortals who had the absolute advantage in numbers. So, when Duque heard that the old bastard Tyrrhena's had finally made his move, Duque still felt a sense of anger. Is this the result I wanted? In order to preserve the vitality of the alliance, I lived every day seriously after I transmigrated. Even after obtaining millions of dollars, I did not waste a single day. I spent all my time improving myself and the strength of the entire alliance. I did not skimp on every major event. Every day, I repeatedly thought about how I could change the course of history, because I thought that even if I could not win every battle beautifully, at least I could bring more hope to the alliance. But Tai, Roy, nah, see, how the hell did you treat me? Chapter 499. I'm working hard for the alliance, coordinating with so many kingdoms day and night. I'm in charge of war, logistics, diplomacy, and coordination. Your hometown Lordaeron was almost raided, and I had to bring people to save you. Now they had finally turned from defense to offense, and there was a glimmer of hope for victory. I'm not dead yet. You're already targeting my people. Tarina's Menethil. I'll F***ck your 18 generations of ancestors, and then F***ck your 18 generations of descendants. Duque gritted his teeth, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His arms trembled from the excessive force, and his nails dug deep into his palms. There was a famous saying in World of Warcraft: don't be afraid of a godlike boss, but be afraid of a pig-like teammate. But there was another kind of person who was even more disgusting than a pig-like teammate: traitor. Yes, in Duke's eyes, Tarina's was a ruthless and ruthless man. Traitor. The Virgin Mary in disguise. Duque could not stop Aiden Piraeus from seeking death. But he had already expressed his desire to protect the Bearer family. Now, before Duque had even received the news that he was dead, Tarina's had already regarded Duque as a dead man, and began to seize power to pave the way for the rise of Lordaeron. Duque really wanted to open a portal and go back. He said to Tarina's, the sun is so bright tonight. What? You're asking me why there's sun at night? It's simple. Because Tarina's, you son of a bitch, are blind. You can't see the situation, and you can't see the future, yet you're sitting in the highest position. You trash. Your heart is as black as the darkest night. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Duque suddenly ran out of the cave and laughed wildly on the mountainside. His laughter was carried far away by the strong wind. At first, Duke was still thinking that he should stop Tarina's precious son, Arthas, from killing his own father, since he was familiar with history. For some inexplicable reason, Duque was suddenly filled with a strong desire to see Arthas commit patricide. That old bastard's shocked and terrified expression must be great. Hoo. Looks like you really want me dead. But I won't. Duque's eyes suddenly became firm and determined. His fierce gaze was as sharp as a sword, like raging waves. However, just as Duque's thoughts were in a mess, he suddenly received a new message from Krasis. Sorry, all of them failed. Duque was certain that Krasis, who was the most talented in magic among the dragons, had sensed Deathwing's eavesdropping. That was why he sent such a baffling magical message that only Duque could understand. Duque was suddenly horrified. What the hell was going on? Wasn't it Krasis who convinced the other 3 dragon aspects in history? How did they all fail? What the hell? I got the most important talisman, Deathwing, and now you're telling me that the 3 most important helpers are not coming? Then why the hell am I still fighting? At this moment, Duque had the urge to cry. That's right. A man does not easily shed tears. But now he felt so bad that he wanted to cry. Is this the so-called despair? No, definitely not. I, Duque, am the man who will become an archmage in Azeroth. If that useless Krasis can't handle the 3 dragon aspects, then I'll go there myself. Although it was a trip, Duque did not have the time to go to another continent to find Blue Dragon King Malygos, nor did he have the time to go to the Cavern of Time in the desert to find Nozdormu. Duque's only chance was the Green Dragon Queen Isera, who was hiding in the Emerald Dream. Isera, the Emerald Dream she guarded, was the reflection of Azeroth in the dream. Everything that happened in the Emerald Dream, and in reality, would affect each other. In theory, it was easy to find Isera, as long as you dreamed, and then contacted her in the dream. In practice, it was impossible to attract Isera's attention, unless it was an extraordinary dream, constructed with extremely strong mental power. Duque hid back in the cave, in a concave not far from the cave entrance. He sealed his body with ice to ensure that the changes in his breath would not be noticed by Deathwing. After instructing the system elf to maintain the monitoring of the Deathwing talisman, Duque took out a bottle of potion from the storage space. It was a black bottle. After pasting a special label on it and placing it in the designated place, he quickly found it. This thing was called Death Dream. Even in Karazhan's laboratory, it was regarded as a taboo by Medivh, and it was the most strictly guarded and labeled as the most dangerous. Just 3 drops of this venom on the tip of the arrow killed Manta, the king of the abyss. Just 3 drops were enough to kill an existence that was 10 times the size and strength of a giant dragon. Just like Deathwing, almost everyone once thought that Manta was absolutely invincible. Now Duque was going to take some Death Dream. He wanted to use the strongest hallucinogenic effect of this thing. The deepest sleep, the deepest dream, Duque said to himself as he opened the bottle. If I can do it, then Isra should be there. No, she must be there. But if there's too much, then I'll be the one to die. Most people only have one chance, but am I an ordinary person? Duque laughed at himself. Yes, Duque was not afraid of death, but he was afraid of decay, or destruction at the soul level. The curse that Sargeras used before he knelt down was of this level. Compared to the slow countdown of death, like a frog being boiled in warm water, Duque was more willing to take a gamble. How many gambles were there in life? He took out a cup and a small bottle of pure water from his storage space. Then he poured just enough water into the cup and opened the black bottle. He carefully lifted the open black bottle to the top of the glass. 3 drops of poison killed Manta in a few seconds. How many drops did Duque need? The deepest slumber and eternal death. The difference between the two was much smaller than most people could imagine. Duque tilted his hand and poured out the smallest drop of poison he could. He watched the drop of poison fall silently into the cup of water. Duque closed the lid of the small bottle and picked up the cup. Damn, it would be great if there was a comfortable spring bed at this time. Duque added. Well, it would be better if there were 2 elven girls with big breasts to accompany me on my left and right. Duque smiled and said to himself, Come on, drink this cup of dichlorvos. After saying that, he drank it in one gulp. Chapter 500. The gale howled in the pale sky, and countless misty grayish-white drifted erratically in front of the towering grim battle fortress. The grayish-white that symbolized death filled every corner of his field of vision. It was like watching an old black-and-white movie. A familiar yet unfamiliar chill ran through his body. Duque shuddered and suddenly realized that this scene was really King familiar. He looked down at his translucent hands, and then at the translucent woman, with white wings in front of him. Duque suddenly realized, F***ck, I'm dying. F***ck, how long has it been? I've almost forgotten this feeling. How long has it been since the last time I died and ran my corpse? The only good thing was that the system was still there. The system notification said, You're dead. Do you want to activate instant corpse resurrection? If yes, please pay additional soul power. Yes/no? Duque decisively clicked yes. Duque had no choice at all. The despicable black dragon was staring at him now. If he really found out and took back the black dragon amulet, he would really have no place to cry. In fact, Deathwing really did find out. He felt that the faint soul connection between himself and Duque was temporarily interrupted. Nesario, who had transformed into his human form and was hiding at the foot of the mountain, frowned. However, in the next moment, he found that the soul connection was restored. There was no mistake. Could it be that I'm too close to the demon's soul, causing problems with my perception? After thinking about it, the demon's soul refused to be touched by any dragon. In order to prevent him from interfering again, the seal that the 4 bastards put on was quite terrifying. He was not afraid of going up against the 4 guys who did not have full strength, but he was afraid of encountering the demon's soul. The backlash of the demon's soul on the entire dragon race was no laughing matter. On the other side, in the ice, Duque panted heavily. Looking at the black dragon amulet in his hand, Duque was speechless for a long time. F***ck, it's too much and I died. Duque smiled bitterly. If it wasn't for the soul force that Medivh had left for him, he would have turned to dust after enduring for 14 days. All right, I'll take a smaller portion this time. Duque used half of the amount from last time and drank it with water. This time, it wasn't the fairy sister, whose vision went dark and she directly saw the grave. Instead, it was a faintly discernible murmur that sounded like the wind, but also like some kind of love action movie. Duke felt unwell, because he recognized that this was Aurelia's purposely suppressed moaning when he stabbed her in the back. The scene in front of him instantly changed. Duque was dreaming, and it was the most intense kind. Aurelia was not a gentle woman. She was independent, strong-willed, determined, and courageous. Especially now that they were facing a great enemy, Aurelia was even more focused on taking revenge on the tribe. She couldn't understand how hot-blooded a young human male, with the body of a little over 16 years old, could be. It couldn't be helped. Even if humans and elves had similar styles, there were still differences between them. In fact, after that night, she didn't have much time with Duque. Plus, Duque was a transmigrator who had graduated from an engineering university. Engineering. It was good enough to see a female. That was the grave of a male. That was the place where Sao's competed with Diaochan. As a result, Duque had actually accumulated a lot of pressure. There were a few times when Duque almost couldn't take it anymore. For a moment, he wanted to make a move on the cabbages beside him, like Vanessa or Alicia. As a result, Duque's willpower in this area was actually quite weak. As a result, under the intense power of the hallucination, Duque made a fool of himself. In the dream, he became the male protagonist of a love movie. His opponents were the beauties he had met after he transmigrated. If he was the only one talking in his sleep, then it would be fine. But the bad thing was that 3 kilometers away from him, the third sister of the Windrunner family was eavesdropping. The group hid in a secluded valley, waiting for news from Sasha. How is it? Is there any movement from the boss? Gavin Rad asked nervously. Sasha's face was red, which was rare. What was she supposed to say? Was she supposed to tell these animals the truth? And what their boss was dreaming about? What embarrassed Sasha the most was that not only did Duque call out Aurelia's name, he even said, "Queen Sylvie, come with the Sasha sisters." These words angered Sasha so much that she trembled. Duke, that bastard, was actually dreaming. Sasha gritted her teeth and stopped eavesdropping. She was afraid that if she kept eavesdropping, she would really go crazy. Ronan asked, "What's wrong with Lord Marcus?" Sasha scolded, "I don't care if he dies." The other 3 in the team were all dumbfounded when they heard this. Duque had courted death, and then he had failed. Several times in a row, he had either given too much or too little. Finally, on the 13th time, Duque suddenly had a vague feeling that he was right this time. His consciousness became blurry again. He seemed to feel the arrival of the goddess of fate. In the confused sound of the wind, he seemed to hear the voice of fate. "You are sliding faster and faster towards your final rest, brave Duque. Before that, is there anything else you want me to do for you? Are you going to save Alexstrasza?" Duque's lips moved slightly. "No, I don't just want to save her. Since I, Duque, have come to Azeroth, I hope to make this world a better place." The murmur of fate continued. "Don't you want something for yourself? Maybe you want your fading life back. Or to rule over a region. Or perhaps eternal life? Everyone has to die. I have no intention of changing this fate. But if I have any hope, it would be to transmigrate here. At least I don't want to leave any regrets, right?" "Regrets? Yes, I really have too many regrets towards this world." For a moment, fate seemed to feel the regret in Duque's heart, and it also felt the selfishness hidden in the bottom of Duque's heart. Fate seemed to let out a light laugh. Then there was darkness. The darkness seemed to be pulling him in. Duque began to feel that it was difficult to breathe, and it was difficult to think. He even wanted to turn around and just disappear in the comfortable darkness. This idea was becoming more and more tempting to him, but he forced himself to be more clear-headed. "Yes." Duque's clear voice surged in the long river of fate. "You want to make me sink into darkness? What a joke. If I am destined to be pulled into the dark hell, then I would rather transform myself into light and turn hell into a bright heaven. If the end of a hero is destined to be a tragedy, then I will rewrite all the scripts. My life, my script, my world. Only I can write all of them. Chapter 501. Was it a cry? A roar? A roar at the end of his road? Or the voice of despair? Duque couldn't tell. He didn't want to tell. He wanted to vent. He wanted to change everything. Was a deviation of 21% enough? If it wasn't enough, I'll help you increase it to 100%, 200%, 1000%. Today, I'll help you increase Nasario to baldy and tomorrow to elated. F***ck. I don't believe it. Is power really everything? Is fate really unshakable? No. Never. Everyone has the right to dream. I've sacrificed so much. I've changed this world so much. Why am I not qualified to break fate and turn dreams into reality? In a domain that Duque couldn't see, with his soul as the center, a wave of strange ripples spread out. In the calm spiritual world, a gust of wind began to stir. It set off monstrous waves, and it stirred up every dream. Many images came rushing at him, but they weren't his dreams. They were other people's dreams. At this moment, Duque saw humans, elves, dwarves, and even orcs and goblins, as well as their wishes and requests. He endured the pain of their nightmares and tasted their sweet feelings. If Duque's previous memories could produce dreams with a capacity of 10 terabytes, then the dreams he was stirring now had a capacity of billions, trillions. There were clearly countless dreamscapes, but Duque's dream of destiny stood out from the countless dreamscapes, struggling to move forward, leaving all the other dreamscapes behind. Ah, this was a cry that transcended the mortal world. Aha! This was a cry that shook the dream world. Ah! This was a roar that shook the river of fate. Every time this voice seemed to reach its peak and could no longer go higher, it was as if a higher mountain would appear for it to surpass, for it to step on as proof that it had surpassed it. Countless dreams began to resonate with Duque's dream, emitting the strongest sound that could spread throughout the entire dream world. Suddenly, Duque felt himself being pulled up, and pulled to a place full of light and color. Almost at the same time, his heavy breathing became smoother, and his frozen and sluggish thoughts became smoother. He didn't open his eyes, but he felt like he was immersed in a green, dazed world. In the flowing green space, another illusion appeared. Unlike the other chaotic images around it, it maintained its shape and continued to grow, completely overshadowing the tiny figure in the mage robe. That's right. Compared to the existence in front of him, Duque was incomparably small. An elegant giant dragon appeared. It seemed both real and illusory. She stretched out her wings, as if she had just woken up. Her body was cloaked in the pale green of the forest at dusk. Duque raised his head, thinking that he would meet her eyes, but he found that her eyes seemed to be asleep. However, he did not doubt that the Lady of Dreams could sense his presence. The corners of the green dragon's mouth curled up slightly, showing an extremely gentle curve for a dragon. You didn't hesitate to dream of death, just to see me? It seems like you want to sacrifice yourself to change your fate? Fate is not as easy to change as you think. Besides, I won't let you make such a sacrifice, Duke Marcus. From the day you descended into this world and entered my domain, you have always been the person in my dream that I am most interested in. The most charming person in my dream. As a legendary dragon aspect who had guarded the Emerald Dream for countless years, what kind of dream had Isra not seen? Monotonous dreams, shallow dreams which made Isra feel bored. She didn't want exciting dreams, but at least something fresh was good. Duque's dream entered Isra's vision by chance. That was only at the level of attention, far from the level of her appearance. However, today was different. The dream that was strong enough to change millions of people and tens of millions of living beings deeply attracted her, which was why she appeared. Seeing Isra's arrival, Duque seemed to instinctively want to stand on the ground, or rather, find a place to stand. However, from the beginning, the ground around Duque wasn't real. It felt like he was stepping on a rice cake that hadn't formed yet. He couldn't exert any force, and it was easy to deform. However, Duque wasn't an ignorant bumpkin. He almost subconsciously thought of the astronauts. This was the Emerald Dream, a place formed by dreams. If that was the case, Duque was dreaming in front of Isra, or rather, imagining it. A gentle wind blew in the Emerald Dream, and Isra's huge eyelids seemed to move. She looked at Duque with interest, but didn't stop Duque's actions. Isra was immediately surprised. She saw Duque solidify under Duque's powerful spiritual will in this liquid-like thing that she called the source of dreams. It formed a chair that looked like wind, but was actually solid. Duque sat on it and adjusted himself so that he was parallel to her line of sight, facing her huge dragon head, less than 10 meters away. Duque apologized straightforwardly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to invade your territory, but not being able to touch the ground makes me feel guilty." "It's okay, Duque. Thank you, Isra. Why did you suddenly come today?" The expression on the green dragon's face should be a smile. But Duque sighed. He didn't have time to beat around the bush with Isra. For the Emerald Dream that mortals couldn't even imagine, the biggest characteristic of dreams was that they were unpredictable. As the master and guardian of this world, Isra also inherited almost the same characteristic. Beating around the bush with her, she could talk to you for 100 years without repeating it. "You're so elegant, so polite, and you don't even put on the airs of a dragon in front of a mere mortal like me. Why do you pretend you didn't see all this? Why did you repeatedly reject the pleas of a great red dragon when Crassus, or Cleostras found you? Oh, Cleostras. Looks like you know a lot, Duque." Isra didn't deny it. Knowledge and history exist in books. Duque pointed at his head. "Okay, can you answer my question?" Isra's huge figure seemed to float backwards. The green dragon in her vision became erratic, and some illusory ripples appeared on her body. It was as if she and Duque, one under the water and the other on the surface. When a drop of water fell into the quiet pond, the ripples blocked their vision. Her eyes were closed, but her face never left the intruder of the dream. Chapter 502. Why turn a blind eye? It's not that simple to save Alexstrasza, and I can feel Nesario lurking near her. If I force myself to fight Nesario, the price I might have to pay. Even I don't know if it's worth it. If even I fall, that will be the day the Emerald Dream collapses." Duque was about to say something, but he suddenly found that he could not speak. Yes, this was Isra's territory. She was the absolute master here. Even in the distant past, we dragon aspects were only given the responsibility of protecting this world. Isra sighed. Duque found that he could speak. "Are you trying to say that humans, elves, and dwarves are not within your protection?" Isra did not reply directly. "Isn't it better to let this world run its own course? If Alexstrasza is destined to be rescued, then what is predestined will naturally happen, right?" Her indifference, and the indifference of the three dragon aspects, made Duque extremely unhappy. Duque raised his head proudly. "Although I'm sorry, I have to say that you're wrong. Fate has its own trajectory, but it will never remain the same. There is no predestined death, nor is there a predestined failure. If every existence were to hide and dream like you when faced with a choice, that would be a natural failure." Isra was silent. "Or are you afraid of the wing of death, Neltharion himself?" Isra retracted her wings. "Don't mention him." The corners of Duque's mouth curved coldly, and he continued to interrogate. "Why not? Answer me, great Isra. Is it the memories of him that give you nightmares? Or is it his own actions that cause the plague of nightmares in the world of dreams?" Although her eyes were still closed, Duque knew that Isra must have some kind of fear of Deathwing in her heart. "I swear, I'll never enter his dreams again. He is probably the only character who is more terrifying in his dreams than when he is awake." If Crassus heard Isra's words, the red dragon would probably be dumbfounded. But Duke knew very well why this was the case. After the ancient god Enzos used the whispers of the ancient god to drive Nesario crazy, Nesario had actually been suffering from severe schizophrenia for a long time. Reason with a lunatic? That's really hee-hee. Duque did not care about Isra's psychological trauma towards Nesario at all. He was only focused on one thing from the beginning to the end: whether he could summon the 3 ancient dragons to fight Deathwing to the death. This was not an easy task. Firstly, the demon soul had taken away their strength. Although they wouldn't be reduced to such a state, their strength would still be reduced by 50%. Secondly, Duque could clearly see that these fellows were only willing to guard their own land after 10,000 years had passed since the era of the dragons. The Blue Dragon King Malygos had become mentally ill because the Blue Dragon army had been wiped out, and his wife had died. The Bronze Dragon King Nozdormu was only willing to focus on his collection every day. He had become a shut-in. The Green Dragon Queen, Isra, was already considered easy to talk to. Duque raised his head high. "You're afraid of Nesario, but you and your race still haven't given up on humans, elves and dwarves, haven't you? Even if you're afraid, you're still looking for a way to destroy Nesario, aren't you?" Isra sighed. "So what? Even if I drag Nesario into the Emerald Dream, I can't destroy him. Even in my domain there are limits." Duque's voice became clearer and louder. "What you can't do doesn't mean that others and other races can't do it. In this world, humans are indeed a new race. But so what? Haven't we created enough miracles? Haven't humans realized those seemingly absurd dreams many times? Since you think you can't do it, why don't you dare to give it a try, and let me rewrite your destiny for you?" The Green Dragon Queen's huge body trembled. "Isra, let me tell you, I've obtained a way to save Alexstrasza. Regardless of whether I can get your help or not, I will persist in fighting Deathwing with her. The only difference between whether you, Malygos, and Nozdormu join us is whether we can take this opportunity to deal a heavy blow to Deathwing. Just because you don't dare doesn't mean that the other dragon aspects don't dare. Help me contact Malygos and Nozdormu. I'll convince them." Duque knew that Isra was still a little lacking in courage, or rather, she didn't trust him enough. She silently sensed Duque's mind, or rather, the aura of the dream that only she could taste. "You're not lying. Well, if you really want to do that, I'll help you call them." The Dragon of Dreams' body swayed. Duque suddenly found that Isra had changed shape. Standing in front of him was a slender, fair-skinned woman. She was beautiful, but she was as ethereal as air. She wore a silky light green gauze robe, and a veil covered the lower half of her face. To some extent, she reminded Duque of the ethereal goddess in the graveyard. Of course, they were not the same thing. Her eyes were still closed. Suddenly, Isra's eyes opened completely. Duque was stunned. It was a pair of eyes that transcended his understanding. It was full of fantasy colors, as if this pair of eyes belonged to someone he knew, someone he loved deeply. It was also as if this pair of eyes was extremely unfamiliar. It was as if at that moment, Duque lost his ability to distinguish colors, because he actually saw all kinds of colors in Isra's eyes. Blue, green, red, black, gold. There was every color in her eyes. There was also a pair of eyes that seemed to be the reflection of his own eyes. With this shocking opening, Duque found that the space on both sides of him was shaking violently. On the left was the 1,000 miles of ice. In a huge ice cave that was at least a kilometer high, a huge blue dragon with dull eyes was indifferent to everything. If he roared angrily, "Isra, how many times have I said it? Don't peep into my dream," Isra would think that there was a chance. However, this dragon that was always happy now looked like an idiot. It just glanced at Isra and didn't say a word. On the right was the 1,000 miles of yellow sand. In a reddish-brown cave surrounded by golden quicksand and Tanaris, there were countless huge monsters that looked like statues. Suddenly, a sandstorm rolled up, and the yellow sand began to gather, gradually forming a recognizable shape. It was the shape of a dragon. Chapter 503. It was the size of Malygos, and it stretched its dusty brown wings lazily. The sand continued to be absorbed into the behemoth's body, and seemed to be mixed with various shiny metal particles. The dragon that was gradually taking shape in front of Duque's eyes shone even more brightly under the scorching sun. "Isra," the sand dragon spat out a few puzzled words. "Why are you disturbing my afternoon nap with a human? Disturb my peace here? Give me a reason not to be angry." Not enough respect, not even a proper title. Duque ignored the Blue Dragon King and shouted at the Time King. Nozdormu, I know you can see the past and future of time and space. Well, since you're convinced that your time is eternal, and that Nasaria will die and become one of your favorite collections, I'm not going to let you live. Then let me ask you 2 questions. First, do you see yourself falling? Second, do you see my future? Puny human, what are you saying? The strange light in the pair of gem-like huge dragon eyes suddenly intensified. I am the incarnation of time. I am eternity. No one can kill me. Nozdormu, who seemed to have seen through everything in the world, roared angrily. The entire sky was filled with sand and gravel. In Nozdormu's domain, every inch of land contained some kind of ancient magic. Just a grain of sand was enough to ensure that an ancient dragon had never existed. From the past to the present to the future. Not to mention a puny wizard Chen Xing. If he was hit, Duque would be reduced to ashes, and even his Aurelia would completely forget about him. The ruler of time was just that terrifying. The corners of Duque's eyes twitched, but he had no intention of dodging or defending. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. Time, space, and fate. These 3 forces were universally acknowledged as unsolvable in countless novels and games. Fighting against it in vain would only make the dragon laugh. That bastard Bronze Dragon King. The power of time is clearly flowing through his body, yet he doesn't care about what happens in the present or the future. The collection meant everything to him. He sent his servants to collect everything, just so he could live in the past, ignoring the present and the future. If he was not scolded awake, the 3 Dragon Kings would not make a move. Then Duque himself would be in danger. If Deathwing didn't die, even if he saved Alexstrasza, she would only be a protective talisman in the future. The Dragon Kings were all at the same level. Did they have 1 amulet fortress or 4 amulets? Duque could only act tough to the end. Under Izura's surprised gaze, Duque stood with his hands behind his back, allowing the wind to blow across his face. His eyes were firm, and his posture was like a pine tree in the storm, with extraordinary pride and a pitiful gaze. This made Nozdormu even angrier. At this time, Izura seemed to sigh softly. It was hard to tell if it was a sigh or just a snort. Anyway, the whole world shook a little, and then the apocalyptic sand that Nozdormu had stirred up was completely erased. Yes, if wiping the blackboard was as simple as wiping away the chalk on the blackboard. This was Izura's emerald dream, and Izura was only connected to the consciousness of the 2 Dragon Kings. If they wanted to kill Duque through the dream, the only possibility was that Izura allowed them to do so. In any other place, perhaps Izura would do the same, using his own method to ignore the death of a human. Even though Duque was a human hero, how many heroes had died in the past thousands of years? In the Emerald Dream, it was completely different. Izura, Nozdormu roared, changing his target. Nozdormu, Duque roared. He once again attracted the attention of the shining golden dragon. Wipe your almost blind eyes and look clearly. Have you seen my past? What surprised Izura was that Nozdormu's reaction to these seemingly ordinary words was extremely intense. You, who are you? Why can't I see your past? You don't belong to this time? You're not human? Who are you? The golden dragon let out a cry as if it was hurt. At this moment, even Maligos, who had been in a daze, seemed to be moved. I'm here to show you the way. Otherwise, you'll be finished in less than 50 years. Duque was speaking the truth. If Duque's knowledge of history was correct, in the future, the 5 Dragon Kings were almost all wiped out, leaving only Alexstrasza. The death of Nozdormu, the King of Time, was even more hilarious. There was a problem. How could a dragon that could manipulate time die? The answer was yes. The current Nozdormu actually died together with the future Nozdormu. There was another important reason why Duque revealed this. In principle, the Bronze Dragon was the guardian of time. Their duty was to protect the past from being changed, and they also had the power to travel through time. In a sense, Duque was a transmigrator from the future to the present Azeroth. Therefore, the Bronze Dragon was a hurdle that he had to overcome. Otherwise, who knew if he would be purified by the Bronze Dragon who would rush back in the future? Duque's biggest card was the death of the Bronze Dragon King in the future. If Nozdormu did not want to die, then Duque could use this card to threaten or reach an agreement with the Bronze Dragon clan. Really, Duque was gambling. If he lost, he would not have to go back to deal with Nesario. He would be wiped out by Nozdormu here. If Nozdormu tried his best, even Isra could not save him. If he won the bet, now, Duque saw Nozdormu's struggle and hesitation. For the first time, this Bronze Dragon King, who only knew how to eat and wait for death, and did not do any proper work, discovered that his eyes, which could see the future beyond time, could not see himself 50 years in the future. The golden yellow gravel dragon was trembling. Duque decided to add fuel to the fire. Yes, I did not belong here, but my future belongs to Azeroth. May I ask, Great King of Time, do you allow a variable like me to exist? Are you willing to give me, and the Bronze Dragon clan, a change in hope? Nozdormu almost instinctively spat out a ball of sand to attack the tiny Duque, but in the eyes of the other two Dragon Kings, Nozdormu was being forced to retreat. This was an extremely strange scene. Duke unleashed his final trump card. Lend me your power, Nozdormu. I am willing to point out the right path for you. As for you, Maligos, I can provide you with a little thing in private. The Blue Dragon King, who had been muddle-headed, suddenly trembled. Chapter 504. Duque fell into a strange state of slumber. On the surface, he was waiting for the red dragon to leave, but in reality, he was still trapped in the Emerald Dream. The red dragon didn't realize this, Nesario didn't realize it, and neither did Sasha and the others who were lurking behind Duque. Almost at the same time, in a Dalajan military camp, a large group of people were busy. It was a huge stone gate. The door was made of purple crystal pillars that conformed to the Dalajan style. Of course, it wasn't as ridiculously huge as the Dark Portal, but it was still one of the best portals in the world. The illusory purplish-blue portal had yet to fully open. When the bystanders looked over, they could only see complete darkness on the other side. Almost 100 Dalajan mages were nervously inspecting every single magical array. The Earth Mage was testing his mana output. The Morning Star Wizard was checking if the structure of the magic formation was complete. A Kirin Tor counselor and a Silver Moon counselor were standing at a high place, commanding everything. It seems like this world hasn't had such a large-scale teleportation in almost 1,000 years, right? The Silver Moon Parliament member muttered to himself. In the square next to it, thousands of people were also busy. They were not ordinary soldiers. Almost every one of them was fully armed and had a knight insignia on the chest of their armor. At the very least, it was a knight apprentice insignia. Meanwhile, the knight's servants were nervously conducting the final checks on their equipment. Weapons, equipment, and a small amount of water and rations. Behind them were a large number of professions: hunters, rogues, priests, and mages. In front of these knights, there were a few holy knights clad in bright silver armor, their bodies glowing with holy light. They had a name that resounded throughout the Alliance, and the Horde, Knights of the Silver Hand. If one were to look carefully, they would notice that most of their weapons were enchanted with the Dragon Slayer spell that was specific to the dragon race. Even if half of the Dalajan mages were to gather for the teleportation, it was impossible for them to have the same teleportation ability as the Dark Portal, much less transport an army of 100,000 in one go. 1,000 people, 1,200 at most. This was already the limit. The most elite troops of the entire Rotterdam Kingdom were gathered there. Almost everyone here had the strength to take down 5 orc warriors by themselves. They were the elite of the elite. They were the pride of Lordaeron. There was a viewing platform at the back of the square. From this balcony, one could clearly see everything that was happening below. Tyrenas, the king of Lordaeron, stood with his head held high. He held the king's scepter in his hand and said to Antonidas, "My military advisor told me that even if we were to face 3 ancient dragons at the same time, we would not be able to defeat them. Even this team can fight against him." Antonidas seemed to be thinking about something. After a few seconds he replied, Your consultant gave you a rather conservative estimate. Tarina's face was filled with pride. Lord Darren has failed before, but Lord Darren will rise again. Dalen, Xion, Lang and Salas, who were standing near Tarina's, frowned. They could sense that Tarina's had used the word Lord Darren. Even Kale, Thats and Kudrin Wildhammer, who were also spectating the ceremony, felt disgusted. Ever since the incident with Lord Darren and Stormwind a few days ago, the kings had become even more vigilant. Everyone knew that Lord Darren was not kind. After they failed to forcefully marry Alicia, the two countries had a war of words. When Lothar threatened to resign from his position as the commander-in-chief, Tarina's finally gave in. He stripped that guy of his title and demoted him to a knight. He made the Pavan family publicly apologize, and at the same time, pushed the blame onto the messenger. They said that the betrothal gift was actually 100,000 gold coins, not 1,000. They said that the guy's math was taught by a physical education teacher. Anyway, it was a bunch of nonsense that even a child would not believe. As a result, even if Lord Darren and Stormwind did not completely fall out, the seeds of conflict had already been planted. If it was not for the fact that the Horde had occupied the entire southern continent and the earthy highlands, which was the bridgehead in the northern continent, perhaps the alliance would have already begun to split. Everyone knew that Lord Darren was twisted. Perhaps it was because Lord Darren had always been a twisted superpower. It was just that they had not shown it before. Now, Lord Darren refused to form an alliance on the grounds that the raid mission was not suitable for too many countries. In fact, the lineup of Lord Darren was something that all the countries might not be able to come up with even if they sold everything they had. Hence, the kings at the side were extremely conflicted. They hoped that Lord Darren's raid could break the current passive situation of the alliance being beaten up. But they also secretly hoped that Lord Darren would not succeed. After all, once they lost the last trump card, the Red Dragon, the Horde would very likely collapse. They could not imagine how arrogant Lord Darren would be after completing this important turning point of the battle. Of course, this time, if Duque was here, he would say that Lord Darren was going to poke a hornet's nest live. Tarina's turned around and opened his arms to the kings. Did you see that? The elites of Lord Darren are so strong. Did you see that? This is the heroic posture of a sure-win army. The kings saw the almost crazed expression on Tarina's face. However, none of the kings said a word except for Lang. Ryan Rin strode forward. This seemingly ordinary movement was filled with a firm, cold and sonorous feeling. Mograine, who was standing beside Tarina's, could not help but narrow his eyes. General Menethil, I just want to tell you one thing. Never look down on those you think are just pawns. With that, Lang walked away without looking back. Chief Marshal Anduin Lothar also left with Lang. Within the alliance, the way of addressing someone was very vague. To be more intimate, one could call him by his name, adding Your Majesty. For example, normally, Duque preferred to call Tarina's Your Majesty. If it was business, then he would call the other party by their military rank. At this point, all kings were generals. It was not wrong for Lang to call Tarina's that. But this way, the relationship between them was very cold. But Lionel was Lionel. Even if he was the ruler of a fallen country, he would definitely not be snubbed. He was asking for it. Lang's public flipping of the table in the political arena made Tarina's face turn sour. Then Tarina sneered. Don't care about him. This is a righteous battle, and we will definitely win. If you are ready to please begin, Master. Antonidas did not like Tarina's. This was the shamelessness of politics. As one of the countries that had received enough benefits, Antonidas had to fully support this operation. On the surface, this was purely Lord Darren's army. In reality, after the Dalajan received the benefits, they allowed many free mages to sign contracts and transfer to Lord Darren. Chapter 505. If the operation failed, Lord Darren would suffer a double loss, and the Dalajan would not have a good time either. Antonidas nodded and waved to the people below. Immediately, a commotion began to spread. Everyone get ready. Open the portal in 5 minutes. Countdown begins. In the plaza, The servants in charge of preparations began to leave like a flowing stream. Soon, the only ones left were the generals and soldiers. Unrelated people were quickly taken away. The Dalajan guards in charge of safety quickly sealed off the plaza. Groups of Morning Star mages stepped into the magic formation beside the portal and entered their designated positions. Everyone began to look at Grand Mage Antonidas on the platform. After preparing the guards, Antonidas quickly began to cast a spell. After a short incantation, Antonidas's consciousness began to enter the hazy void. He was looking for the spatial coordinates of Grim Battle Fortress. Teleportation was never an easy task. Unless it was a capital city of a kingdom, it was difficult to have complete spatial coordinates. Most of the time, mages had to explore it themselves and lock onto a target. If they were not careful, it would be a tragedy. Hence, few mages below Radiant Moon dared to teleport to areas outside the major cities. To avoid alerting the enemy, the Alliance did not even set the coordinates with the Grimbatal mages beforehand. The person they relied on the most was naturally Breaking Dawn Mage Antonidas. He did not have to spend much effort to find his target. It was to the east of Grim Battle, near the Dragon's Maw Gate in the future. He could not set the portal on top of Grim Battle Mountain. Firstly, there was not much space there, and secondly, the assault team would be very passive against the Red Dragon's repeated attacks. He also did not have the cheating skills of the Wings of Death to directly find the secret passage to the Red Dragon Queen. He could only choose the most suitable spot, an empty space between the Horde's army and Grim Battle Fortress. Found it. The moment Antonidas locked onto the coordinates, the huge portal in the plaza began to fluctuate violently. First it was a ripple, and then it turned into a huge wave made of an unknown substance. In a few moments, the scene on the other side of the portal appeared. It was a huge passageway, and both sides of the passageway were filled with torches. The tribal warrior, who was in charge of guarding, was shocked by the sudden appearance of the portal in front of him. Then he saw the Alliance soldiers standing in front of the portal, ready to charge. General Abendis, the highest commander of this operation, raised his sword high. In the name of Lordaeron, charge! There was a loud roar in the square. With the most capable Silver Hand as the leader, the commandos rushed over. Leading the way, Abendis and Sidan Dathrahan charged forward like two sharp swords, and the beast men immediately fell into chaos. However, it was only a moment of confusion. To the surprise of the people of Rotterdam, the orcs seemed to be quite prepared. Hundreds of well-equipped orc warriors with considerable strength rushed out from the various branches of the main road of the fortress and fought with the elites of the Rotterdam Kingdom. The hundreds of orcs charged back at the 1,000 elites of the Rotterdam Kingdom, and it seemed that they still had a chance of winning. A few orc centurions tried their best to encourage their tribesmen, hoping to use the relatively narrow terrain to contain the Alliance's offensive and turn the tide of the battle. However, he soon realized that his thoughts were just wishful thinking. In front of him were two of the most ferocious people in the Alliance. Moreover, even though the warriors here were also known as elites, and also had a good reputation for bravery in the clan, unfortunately, even though they had the same title, there was still a fundamental difference in combat power between warriors of different clans. Many factors such as physique and resistance determine combat power. If the combat power of the elites of the Black Rock clan, under the direct jurisdiction of Orgrim, was 100, these guys would at most be 70. In front of the elites of the Rotterdam Kingdom, that was not enough at all. The strength that they were proud of was useless in the face of faster speed. Often, when the orcs swung their arms, a sharp sword had already pierced through their terrible faces. This was especially so for the paladins of the Silver Hand, who were charging at the front. Killing orcs of this level was no different from chopping melons and vegetables. Sidan was holding a sledgehammer that shone with holy light, just like the legendary Titan, who controlled the supreme divine power. As long as he swung the sledgehammer, several rays of holy light would sweep into the crowd of orcs like lightning. The platinum holy light hammer emitted a holy aura, and easily hit the orcs that weighed hundreds of kilograms like flying balls. With the enhancement of the paladin's skill dedication, Sidam would have a large amount of holy light penetrating the ground with every step he took, and then bursting out from the ground. As long as any orc was slightly weaker, their legs would immediately be burned by the holy light, and they would be charred directly. However, that was not the end. General Abendus, who was beside him, also became more and more courageous as he fought. In the end, he seemed to have entered a state similar to being possessed by the god of war. His red armor, that looked like it was burning like flames, was emitting some kind of light that was similar to holy light during his intense movements. That was already some kind of materialization of the special energy of the warrior profession, fury. The great sword in his hands actually surged with red power, and his majesty was like the arrival of Odin, the titan of creation. The roar that came out of his mouth was like thunder, and he did not even need to draw his sword. Just the power of fury alone was enough to unleash the special warrior skill, Thunderous Strike, and directly kill the heavily injured orcs. The soldiers of the assault team were so ferocious that the kings who were watching the battle from behind stared dumbfoundedly at all of this. They felt like they were in a trance, as if just relying on the elites of the elites, they could wipe out all the tribes. Terenaz's face had an unspoken arrogance that did not need to be expressed. His gray hair fluttered in the wind, and he had an indescribable air about him. Antonidas was silent. He watched as the assault team began to split into two groups. One group built a line of defense, using junk as cover, and began to seal the largest entrance of the fortress. The assault team, on the other hand, went all the way to the deepest part of the fortress. It seemed like there was hope. At this time, Antonidas's senses spread out in the fortress. He wanted to see if he could help the troops predict danger, such as which direction the red dragon was in. At this moment, he suddenly sensed a strange existence. To be precise, he sensed the aura of a magic circuit. He swore that he would never forget this presence for the rest of his life, because it came from the same source. It was the presence of Arcane Throne and Ice Crown. Even though it was very, very weak, Antonidas would never mistake it for someone else. After all, in this world, other than that kid, there was no one else who knew these two arcane circuits. What the hell? Duke Marcus was still alive? Antonidas's mind went blank for a moment. He completely forgot why he spread out his senses. Chapter 506. The people of Lordaeron very quickly ran into trouble. To be honest, this was not their fault. If one disregarded Du's actions, there was no problem with their surprise attack. The fault was that they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, and met the wrong people. If they had come a few days earlier, they would have met with the emptiness of grim battle. At that time, the entire fortress only had the chief of the Dragon Maw clan Zulid. If they had come later, when the tribe had finished adjusting, there would not have been so many gods. But to say that the people of Lordaeron were unlucky was the same thing. At this point in time, the entire tribe, other than the two brothers Rend and Maim who were sent to kill Gul'dan, and Grom Hellscream who was still being chased in the Tirisful forest, happened to have a meeting with a large number of chiefs. Yes, it was in this grim battle that the meeting was held. Just yesterday, Great Chief Orgrim, who had just barely escaped with his life, had left his deputy Sabek behind after making arrangements for the war in the Earthy Highlands. After that, a large number of chiefs had come to a meeting, and it was a secret meeting. Orgrim, Kilrog Deadeye, Zulid, Cashdrake, Rexer, Kargith Bladefist, and a large number of chiefs from second-tier clans. Because it was a secret meeting, of course it would not be a big deal. The moment grim battle was ambushed, Orgrim's reddish-brown face almost turned green like his compatriots. Operation Decapitation? Duque gave Orgrim too much pressure. Without knowing that Duque was also in trouble, Orgrim almost immediately thought that it was Duque's plan. For a moment, Orgrim was on the verge of collapse, but the chief was still the chief. After sending some ordinary soldiers to test the waters, he immediately had a plan. Sitting at the head of the table, Orgrim calmly asked, "Is the human portal still open?" "Yes," Zulid replied. "Kargith, bring your people and Rexer to block the portal." "Understood." The one-armed Kargith waved the blade attached to his broken arm, revealing a cruel and bloodthirsty smile. Zuluhit, tell Necros to hide. Yes. As for the others, follow me to the Alliance to get a piece of meat. As he finished, his burly body suddenly stood up. Everyone could see Orgrim gripping the infamous hammer of destruction tightly. The people of Rotterdam were dumbfounded. After all, this wasn't their territory. Even with the map provided by the bronze-bearded dwarves, not everyone could clearly find their way in the middle of a bloody battle. Apart from the unlucky ones who were smashed to death on the spot, the people of the Rotterdam kingdom were dumbfounded, especially when the roof of the main passage of the fortress suddenly collapsed, and a large number of powerful people jumped down. The Alliance and the Horde had been fighting for a long time, and everyone knew each other very well. Everyone knew that the Alliance relied on formations. The infantry shield formation at the front opened up the path, the spearmen and great swordsmen in the middle, the formation mages and archers at the back, and the priests to heal them. If he could grind down the energy consumption, he could teach the beastmen how to behave. The Horde's strength lay in the quality of the individual soldiers. Once it got into a chaotic battle, an orc could easily kill 10 human infantrymen. The Horde's attack this time was aimed at the Alliance's weak spot. The warriors of the Broken Palm clan appeared out of nowhere and cut off the Alliance's formation in an instant. They blocked the entrance of the Alliance's teleportation portal. In just one exchange, more than 20 priests were killed in an instant. The sharp blade attached to the arm caused the Church of Light to suffer the most tragic loss since the start of the war. There was a limited number of descendants of the teleportation portal, and those who could come were the elites of the elites. These priests, any one of them was a bishop of a region. Their deaths were definitely a huge loss to the Alliance. Moreover, the Alliance's unique strategy of fight, get injured, recover, fight again was broken, and the psychological impact on the Alliance's soldiers was definitely huge. Think about it, with these nannies and dads around, as long as they had a breath left, they might be able to be saved. Without them, serious injuries meant death. How could the psychological pressure be the same? Far away in the Dalajan, Terenas, who was sitting on the balcony, saw this and his face turned green. Master, please hold on for a while. I'm afraid we have to send reinforcements. It was impossible for such a huge operation to not have a backup plan. That was, of course, Uther's silver hand. Almost as soon as he saw that the passage was sealed, Uther had already taken the lead and rushed over. Behind him, Tyrion Fordring also rushed over with his warhammer. Beside them were 50 silver hand paladins. However, as soon as they rushed over, they found that the battlefield was still too narrow. As the gate of a stronghold, the main passage, which was 50 meters wide, was definitely not narrow. But for a battlefield, it was undoubtedly at the level of a narrow path. The two sides fought close to the entrance of the teleportation portal. This time, the Alliance suffered a big loss. No one dared to blast magic over the portal, because it would affect the stability of the portal. They could only rely on hand-to-hand combat and bows and arrows. In a normal battle, would the Broken Palm clan be afraid of this? Kargith against Uther. Rexor against Tyrion. Both sides were evenly matched. It seemed to be a stalemate here, but the problem inside was huge. Their retreat was cut off, which in itself affected their morale. When Orgrim arrived with a group of ferocious chieftains, Abendis and Satan's faces turned green. They never thought that the tribe's best fighters were almost all here. This pair of founders of the Scarlet Crusade in the future barely held off the chiefs of 4 second-tier clans. But that didn't stop Orgrim from sneering, as he led a large group of the most powerful chieftains to slaughter them. Shields were the best against swords and knives, and the worst against heavy weapons. When Orgrim, who swung a hammer that weighed more than 100 kilograms like a toy, appeared, for the first time, the Alliance soldiers realized that they could become part of a force of 1,000 men. Well, those small soldiers who were sent flying. With a sweep of the hammer, at least 5 or 6 Alliance elites were sent flying, or had their arms and legs broken, or their bodies twisted. Only the paladins who activated their invincibility could survive a hit from the hammer. Since that was the case, When the paladins, who looked like big golden eggs, were sent flying, they also knocked into many of their comrades like bowling pins. The hammer of destruction, stained with human flesh and bones, was overflowing with ferocity. At this moment, anyone would think that this terrifying hammer was a divine artifact. The Alliance was defeated, and the elite soldiers of Rotterdam were reduced at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. No, General Abendus was furious. He almost went crazy. After all, those who died were his most elite subordinates. Many of them had followed him for at least 5 years. But now, it was like a sickle cutting the wheat in the field. The grass was being cut. He did not know what was going on. But this time, Rotterdam was really in trouble. You're tuning in to the Lee May's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.